Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Good morning. This is the August 12th Committee of the Whole workshop. Was the meeting properly advertised?
Mr. Chairman, this meeting was advertised in the August 7th, 2021 Pensacola News Journal in the board's weekly meeting schedule.
Perfect. Commissioner May, you want to lead us in the pledge?
Happy to. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
Board, I want to give you an opportunity if you have any quick commissioner comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't normally say a whole lot before committee of the whole, but it's very tragic news. The Northwest Escambia community has lost a young man that has been the rock for Northwest Escambia football ever since I've been in office. Greg Gibson, found out he passed away very early this morning. Didn't have, never had a son playing at Northwest Escambia, but, loved those kids like his own. And it's not, excuse me, not an exaggeration to say that without Greg's dedication and persistence and advocacy on behalf of those young people in that Bradbury Park, Bratt, Burnville community, Walnut Hill, very likely there wouldn't be a Northwest Escambia football organization. For many years, he was my only point of contact with the league. He grew the league over the number of years, while at the same time, obviously working and raising his own girls, coaching at Northview High School. But grew Northwest Escambia from nothing to a very healthy, successful organization. They're going to be fielding twice the size of the league this year as they have the last few years, and that's in large part due to Greg's efforts. And it's I was shocked. I was shocked when I heard that this morning, and it's just one of the most tragic things that I've heard in a number of years. Just a very good guy that did everything for the right reasons. It's not public service in the way that that we talk about public service sometimes, but it's truly community service to those young people, to so many families that if Northwest Escambia wasn't playing ball, there wouldn't be the resources to be able to get over the state line to Atmore, to Flomaton, or have the resources to come down to play at Cantonment. So he was. I mean, they were it for a large portion of my constituency, and Greg just did a fantastic job. And I talked to Michael very early this morning, and I would certainly expect to try to bring something to the board, in the future to recognize Greg's efforts. And Bradbury Park is I do think this is one common thing throughout all of the parks through the county. If you take a snapshot of what they are now versus what they were 7 or 8 years ago, they're all they're all much, much healthier. And each, the larger the park, the more involved folks that it needs. And so I think it's one of the huge successes that we've had is the health of the youth and recreation sports. But Northwest Escambia football and Bradbury Park wouldn't be what it is today without Greg's help and advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner May?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner Berry. Probably my entire life has been centered around coaching Little League sports for 32 years, and you're absolutely right. Greg Gibson was a wonderful person, a wonderful coach. He would often reach out to me for advice. I remember Northwest Escambia getting birth after the closing of Century and not being able to make the trip to Cantonment. Whenever I'd call on Coach Gibson, even as Mike Rose would help facilitate, even if I needed a T-ball game or if we just needed something. It's just a sad day. It's a sad day in the youth football world, and you're right, we have a lot of parks, and we have a very strong fraternity, and my phone started ringing early this morning about Coach Gibson, and I've talked to Coach Enfinger and Coach Bubba at our property appraiser's office, and Howie Comer, that when we first started the league at Northwest Escambia, and it's just a sad day, and it reminds us of how dangerous and how mean COVID and the coronavirus can be. Unfortunately, in many of our programs and the programs that I'm most closely associated with, one of my coaches, Coach Trey Bonner, has been on a ventilator and is just getting out of the hospital. And we have cheerleading coaches who, as you said, are all volunteering their time and giving back and really risking their health to give our children an opportunity to play. And so I just, it is real. Hospitals are filling up. This is a sad day for those young guys. I know Coach Gibson coached the same team for about the last 5 years. Today I know will be a traumatic day of practice, and I just want to offer my support. I've always supported you in Northwest Escambia, and whether it's grief counselors that we need to get out there today or whatever resources we have. I mean, we can call the superintendent, but we certainly want to be of help. And I do see Mr. Rose there, and I would ask, Mr. Administrator, that we make sure that, we can't save the world, we can't control things outside of our jurisdiction, but at least get information to parents about the dangers of what's going on, because unfortunately, we've just had so many of our Little League coaches adversely affected by COVID. And for me, Steve, it's really a sad day for the football community, but I know for Northview, for Northwest Escambia, Molina, and those that you represent in that community, this just has to be a worst day nightmare that a Little League coach with so much influence would die from COVID. And so his family's in my prayers, and naming the park or whatever you want to do for Coach Gibson, just know that I'll be very supportive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Underhill.
Nothing for the good of the whole.
Commissioner Bergosh.
Nothing.
I also want to pass along our thoughts and prayers to Ginger Bowden Madden and the Bowden family. Another great ball coach.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Someone say you may not have rooted for him, but you respected him, and
Good man.
great man, and so it's of course a huge loss for his family, but also for everyone whose lives that he impacted. Also, two other things to mention real quick. I want to recognize Scott Lunsford and his office for the rollout of the Blue Angel license plates that occurred on Saturday. It was a very smooth process. I think that everyone had a chance to register to go pick them up, and they had a great process, but also just with his involvement in our delegation's push to get that license plate across. They look really good, and of course some of that money goes back to support the National Academy, the museum out there. So,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, sir.
And my mind's just kind of not here because of Coach Gibson, but I forgot to thank, I know Representative Andrade was over earlier with Scott Lunsford, but he did come over with Community Health to the Vaccinate in School giveaway that we had. And I do want to thank Representative Andrade and our staff, Leroy Williams and Claire Long. And I think we had some people from our Sean from our finance office and other staff who just stopped by to help out. So I want to thank all of them.
Yeah, that was a great event. And then also, just real quick, we've supported a movie night in the park for the first Friday of the month for the last 4 months in Scenic Heights. And in my excitement of speaking of that the other night, I forgot to recognize Councilwoman Braher for her involvement, but it was a great little outdoor event that was held at Hitzman Park with the support of the sheriff and some of my discretionary funds that they held a movie every Friday night, or every first Friday of the month, and had some sneaky tiki shaved ice and popcorn and stuff. But it was a great little family event, and it was nice just to be out with the family and enjoying the time, and so glad to see other families there enjoying the movie. So.
Robert, was it the huge TV that they were talking about getting yet, or was it?
I don't believe this. I believe that was from
They hadn't bought that one, okay.
the Scenic Heights PTA brought it,
Okay,
but it was an
okay.
inflatable screen.
Okay.
But it was, they had 4 speakers going, which it was like surround sound in a park, which is tough to do, but I think they had a great summer doing that, and hopefully a good thing for the families to do in the neighborhood. Anything else? Okay. I don't see her in here yet, but Murray Mott will be coming in a little bit later to do a quick update, but we'll go ahead and get to the Major Transit Development Plan 10-year update from Tanya.
Good morning, Commissioners. We're here today to present to you the information for the Major Transit Development Plan. It's a requirement under the Florida Administrative Code 14.73 for all transit systems to provide a development plan as far as the future forecasting, usually within 5 to 10 years. And it's also a requirement of the Florida Block Grant funding as well. Today with us, we have our Senior Transit Planner, Brian Waterman with HDR, that will be doing the presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here today to discuss the Escambia County 10-year Transportation Transit Development Plan. The purpose of this item is to present the TDP for adoption, answer any questions you have. As Tanya indicated, it's due to FDOT by September 1st and is required for block grant funding. Here's a brief outline of what I'm going to cover today. I respect your time, so I'll go through the slides pretty quickly. But feel free to stop me if you have any questions going on. Before I get started, briefly about myself, I have over 20 years in transportation and transit planning. Most recently, I was the transit planning manager for Star Metro in Tallahassee. In addition to that, I'm invested in your community. My daughter is moving in tomorrow to UWF as a freshman. So they're joining me this afternoon and going over tomorrow morning to get her situated in her dorm on campus. So before I get started, I want to briefly go over the benefits of transit. It's an important transportation mode for people who do not have access to cars and those people who want to lessen the lights on their personal vehicle. It saves money. If you use a transit over a car, you're saving roughly 60 cents a mile or $12,000 a year. And there's a chance there is also a return on investment. Every dollar invested in transit, there's a $4 return to your community. In addition, there are some personal benefits of transit. I will use this slide to the day I die. This was created from a couple of years ago associated with that. So what is a TDP? A TDP is a 10-year planning document. It is your roadmap to the community. It says we are here today, based off the data and analysis and public engagement. Here's where we'd like to go tomorrow, and here are the resources we need to get there. It is not a binding document. It's a plan. It's your plan. It's a roadmap through annual updates, through discussions with the community, through partnerships, through more engagement. The projects identified are either moved forward or they're put off. That's up to you. FDOT wants this so it can be your advocate, so it knows what you guys need to get things done. So when it works with the legislature and works with the federal authorities, it can say, these agencies in Florida will have these great grand visions, and here's what they need to get done. And also, in addition to that, if you do decide to apply for grants, federal or state, having your TDP is a prerequisite, and it shows that you've done the analysis to show these projects are warranted and needed. So in other words, it kind of focuses your growth. and focuses where you want to go based off a series of analysis and feedback from the community. And I'm going to kind of briefly go through the analysis we did, starting with baseline conditions. We looked at the overall network. We looked at how people access the system. We looked at where people, where the destinations are trying to get to, jobs, services, population, employment density, transportation disadvantaged individuals, major activity centers, and even travel time. And what you see here on the map here on the left is kind of what's called a transit propensity index. The darker the color, the more likely that area is to support transit ridership and where the needs are. In addition to that, we looked at your planning documents, your comp plan, the previous TDP, your long-range transportation plan, the Florida transportation plan, new developments, to get an idea of where growth is going, what opportunities exist. But this is also a public plan, and so there was a robust public engagement aspect to this thing. From experience working with Star Metro, I found that the best way to do public engagement is through a phased approach. In other words, there are different audiences we want to speak to throughout the process. So when we're doing baseline conditions and we're doing an assessment of the existing system, it doesn't make sense to talk to the non-rider. We want to talk to the rider. So we did our engagement around that. But once we had to understand the existing system, we wanted to branch out to the larger community and say, okay, now we know where the system is. To know where we want to go, we got to talk to the rest of the community. That includes stakeholders. That includes leadership. It includes the general populace, get an idea where they want to go. And from there, we come up with our project list. And since this is your project and your community's plan, we go back out to them and say, okay, based off this project list, what's your thought on them and what's your priority? Again, to kind of cover the engagement, we worked well with your communications office, developed a lot of material, flyers, news releases, social media, Twitter, the whole 9 yards. While COVID was certainly challenging and getting the message out there, I think we did a pretty good job. In terms of overall total impressions, 1.3 million people or clicks were to take place. They saw it. 6,000 people went to the website. We had advertising impressions, social media engagement, and of course, we had about 1,200 responses in the surveys. In addition to that, we talked to stakeholders. You can see the list here, but they represent the movers and shakers of the community and an idea of where things are going. Overall, from the public engagement, we found that there is support for transit. They see it as a valuable need to the community and that there is desire for more investment, primarily focusing on improving the existing system before expanding to new areas. In other words, make the existing system work better, then as that's done, then start reaching out. So based off that feedback, we came up with a list of different projects and priorities. So certainly there are service projects, and this is the idea of expanding the existing system. The idea here is to have Sunday match Saturday, Saturday match weekday, and expand the service later into the evening, the span of service. In addition, there are opportunities to possibly expand service in other areas, such as going out to Santa Rosa County or out to Navy Federal, or even relocating the routes to better serve Baptist Hospital when it opens in 2 years. To prioritize the projects and get an idea where they should fall in that 10-year horizon, we developed this evaluation criteria based off community support, based off route efficiency, based off ridership, and the like. And we get an idea here how they score out. So the top ranking project is a relatively easy improvement to Route 52 to have the frequency be 30 minutes all day. Right now there's a gap in the middle of the day where it's only an hour. We're saying go ahead and fill in that gap, do that. From there, it goes down the list based off public support. They want Sunday to match Saturday, and then other frequency improvements, with really the new service ideas being postponed to later years. And there's also capital projects we want to identify as well. These capital projects are not rated in the evaluation criteria. These are just needs of the system that were identified by looking at previous TDP documents and talking to ECAT staff. With that, we come up with an implementation strategy. So certainly over the next 10 years, we're going to maintain the existing system. We feel that the next year, it's certainly feasible to go ahead and improve the frequency around 52. And then we have different projects kind of staging in over the time horizon. These projects we feel are most, let's say this correctly, have the funding that could be implemented. I'm not saying the funding exists. I'm saying that there are the right pieces in place to get the grants, to get the partnerships, to get them done. Okay, so when I talk about the express bus to Milton in 2029, we feel that the data would support a grant application and they reaching out to Santa Rosa County to say, hey, could you help fund this and stuff? That's a plausible scenario. Likewise, with the Baptist Hospital realignment, that is a situation where the ridership shows if you reroute the routes to better serve that, there's an opportunity to reach out to Baptist Hospital to maybe do an employee pass program. It would be, we think, a positive project. We also include fleet electrification here as a capital project. Federal government and state governments are really pushing that. We feel that there is a lot of money on the horizon for transit agencies to transition over to all-electric fleets, so we put that project in there to cover that. Yes, it is an expensive proposition over the next 10 years, but again, this is not a binding document. This is a roadmap. This is a plan. If things don't fall into place in your annual update, which Tanya does every spring, back to the state and back to you guys, make the necessary adjustments. We're just saying that as opportunity presents itself, here's the direction you should go in. Here's what the data says, here's what the analysis says, what needs to be done. So next step is for you to adopt this, and we submit this to AFDOT, and then that lays the foundation for the block grant and subsequent grant applications. We hope to grow and expand the system. Thank you for your time, and certainly Tanya and I can answer any questions you may have.
Let me ask you, at what point would we consider some sort of service or a trunk line out to Beulah where the Navy Federal campus is, where there's a lot of growth? That's one area where I think that you'd get some riders potentially.
Yes, I agree. That is in the second 5 years. So the best way to look at a TDP is first 5, second 5.
Yes, sir.
So first 5 is what we feel is the most cost feasible and where we feel that the grants exist. That project is in the second 5, which is kind of your quote unquote wish list projects and such. So we have it as a second 5 proposal. I believe it's in 2027. It's a project list based off the financial plan. But again, that's, if you feel an opportunity exists tomorrow, we can move, you can make it happen tomorrow.
Well, I see buses going over to one county over, and I don't necessarily know what the ridership is there. I know for a while we went all the way around to the beach, and there was 5 riders a day. So obviously, Tanya, that area out in Beulah is exploding. I mean, we've had tremendous growth. We now have 4 lanes on 9 Mile Road, which is helping, but when that Navy Federal cranks back up, there's a lot of employees there. Not all of them can afford the housing nearby there. So I just think that that's something that needs to be factored into a plan, and waiting 5 years, I just don't think is intelligent.
And if I may real quick, certainly between now and September 1st, if you feel that we want to make changes to this timeline, my staff can go back and
you're the expert, but I do know, we get dinged a lot. I get dinged a lot for buses running around empty. And we've talked a lot in 5 years on this board, we've talked a lot about streamlining the routes and eliminating some of the non-performing ones, that run around with 18 people a day. But yet there's that booming area, and we're not even looking at sending at least one bus. Meanwhile, we're going to Milton. I'd like to know more about that route. I don't know how much they kick in. Do they kick in at all? Does Santa Rosa kick in at all for what we do for them?
Right now, sir, we don't have a route that goes to Milton.
Okay, I was looking at a graphic that you had illustrated.
That was a recommendation to go, that was one of those recommendations that.
We go through Gulf Breeze, though.
Yes, sir, we do go to Gulf Breeze. We go through Gulf Breeze to get to the beach.
To get to the beach,
Yes,
okay.
sir. And FDOT did provide us some emergency grant funding when the bridge was closed to provide that additional service going through to
We got
Tiger
some
Point. That stopped once the bridge was opened.
Okay. Well, like I said, I wanted to point, those were my takeaways from there. So we're not going to Milton before we look at Beulah.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
And we have been in communications with Navy Federal. We've had multiple meetings with them to look at some potential service, if it's a park and ride lot or van pool, but we have had several conversations with them at some potential service.
Commissioner Underhill?
Thank you. I want to go back to your slide number 5, or slide 5 out of 112 is what it is in my thing here. Benefits of public transportation is titled.
Not on this
There
one?
you go. Yeah. So your first bullet there, that public transportation is efficient. The fuel efficiency of a fully occupied bus is 6 times greater than that of an average single occupant auto. Did you run numbers on the efficiency per route or per passenger mile of our routes compared to, say, driving in my Ford Excursion?
We did do a complete route profile in the full document of every single route in terms of its operation efficiency, its ridership, its span of service, its coverage, and the like.
And in that, did you find any of our routes that were actually less efficient and more costly than if people drove cars?
No, we didn't. That was not a part of the analysis.
No, I think that'd be a very important part of the analysis. Next question is for Tanya. Do we still, famously, we had 8 routes that had 8 or fewer riders per hour. You and I have talked about that talking point many times. That came out of the MTAC report from 2 years ago, I think. Might have been 3 by now. Time flies when you're having fun. Are we still running routes with 8 or fewer riders per hour?
We do have, there's only 2 routes that were suspended once COVID hit, when we went to modified services. We're still on track to have our software implemented by October, so we can start to get the actual hard numbers of the analysis of which routes are the most efficient productive-wise and which ones are costing us more. Right now, we're still using the same information that we've been using over the previous years. So we do have our eyes on those particular routes to look at very closely as far as those modifications.
Okay, so it's important to remember that prior to COVID, fixed route transportation, mass transit in the United States was on the decline year over year for many years. Now, obviously, any data that we use during the COVID timeframe is completely useless. That doesn't help us at all. But we do know that fixed route transportation has been radically on the decline because folks, are doing a lot more things electronically and all that kind of thing. I think that's a fairly well-documented truth. What I have seen in our transportation is that inside the core of the city, we have a pretty significant population that utilizes the transportation, and I believe that mass transit there has proven to be an effective asset for the people of Escambia County. But what I've also seen is when we do things like try to make a route that goes out to the Floribama, famously, and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to run an empty bus route that was so unused and unneeded that we were in fact giving away gas cards to get people to ride the bus. So that's kind of an interesting, quite frankly, probably one of the best examples of government trying too hard to do something that they shouldn't do. Obviously, the routes that we have now are not nearly as egregious as that one that ran out to the Floribama, but we still have routes that are running well below, well below a fully occupied bus, as we have in our slide deck. When you have those routes that have been in place for a long time and nobody's riding them, or very few people are riding them, what that indicates is that you are not providing the service that is needed by the market. Okay? And Tanya, I give my hats off to you for some of the improvements that you've been able to make during your tenure, but we're still a far cry away from spending the resources at the place where the people need the resource. It's not our job to create the need, it's our job to meet the need. So I am disappointed to see that there's really nothing in here about, about doing better, only about doing bigger. And bigger isn't better. And when I say nothing in here about doing better, I mean specifically about doing away with unneeded routes. Those routes, and we have to, I know it's of course, the union's going to flip out as soon as I start talking about it again. I may even get sued again for it, like I did last time. But the truth remains that running mass transit buses that run empty consistently, the citizens are telling us that they do not need that route. And what we do know also is those resources would be much better spent in the high-density core to increase the periodicity of the high-density routes. You should only be running buses where buses are needed, and the need is defined by who's actually willing to pay to get on the bus. So I can't support the argument here because it talks more about expansion, about expanding out to Milton and things like that. That's exactly the opposite direction of where we ought to be going with our mass transit. We need to be providing a much better service inside the core, and not really what you're talking about there is essentially creating an intra-city bus system when we're moving people around from places like Milton into town. That's not really the purpose for mass transit. Mass transit requires a mass amount of citizens to ride on it, so therefore it needs to be focused on the dense areas. I'm disappointed that we don't have a little bit more of that discussion and a little bit more of the input, which is very significant in the public, in the body of public transportation study that tells us that what we're talking about here in growing a larger fixed route system is moving in the wrong direction from what the market is telling us we should be doing. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Tanya, don't we do periodically an analysis of ridership?
Yes, sir. The last one that we have done, the comprehensive operational analysis, was done in 2014. And it came usually typically comes right after you do a TDP. We have been discussing looking at doing another one now that COVID is kind of slowed down, that we were able to actually look at these routes, because we will have the actual data from the software now that we have it. We are aware that there's plenty of work still to do with ECAT. As far as making the routes more productive and more efficient, there's areas that we do know that could be beefed up, areas that probably, once we see that no one's riding, why do we still have those areas? So we do know that there is some work to be done to realign our current routes. We are still working on that. We are still aware that there's opportunities for smaller shuttles on certain neighborhood areas versus some of the bigger buses. So we are looking at diversifying the fleet instead of having all big buses having a variety of sizes. So this is although this is a planning document, this is not the end of our goal to get us to a more productive and efficient system.
So have we not adjusted routes since 2014, is what you're saying?
We did have two phases, routes for the COA, Phase 1 and Phase 2. I believe Phase 2 was back in I think it was 2016. It's been quite some time. That was right before we came over to be part of the county, and we have not since that time. Yes, sir.
So with what Commissioner Underhill said, so there's a bus that goes to Floribama, and it's been going there since 2000. I thought it just went to the Southwest Library, but you mean there's a bus that runs year-round to like Floribama and to Johnson Beach, no matter what the ridership is?
No, sir. That particular route, I believe, stopped. I can't remember specifically what year.
I killed
but
that when I came on board.
It's been like 2015, 2014. It was a route that was funded through a special grant for a new service. It was not productive, and it was
Okay,
quickly.
so it's not run, we don't run
Currently,
buses.
no, sir, we do not.
So, I mean, and I hear what the commissioner is saying, but I would think that bus routes could be almost seasonal. I mean, because in the summer months, why wouldn't a bus run to Johnson Beach and you get people out there? So, I mean, to me, on a fixed route and no adjustment since 2014 seems somewhat counterproductive. I mean, wouldn't we, I mean, the change of demographics and even job creation from 2014 to 21 certainly would have to have some type of impact, I would think.
Absolutely, yes, sir. That there is an impact. There has been change in our community. There's been growth in certain areas. Other areas may have declined. So it is an opportunity for us to look at expanding potential markets where there's a need, but having the actual data to back that up before we actually spend those funds to implement that service.
Well, I mean, the data for me is when we're riding a bus and there's only two people on it, like Commissioner Underhill just kind of alluded to. I mean, if we have a high concentration area, I think we ought to be able to make those adjustments. Are you saying we can't make route adjustments without a study?
No, sir, I'm not saying that. No, sir.
So we could, we have the power to make in my opinion, a common sense route adjustment.
Yes, sir. If the board chooses, yes, sir.
Well, I mean, I'm not counting how many people on the bus, so, I mean, it would have to be a recommendation to the board, but if there's a route that's not efficient, I mean, you'd find my support.
Yes, sir.
In the elimination of it, or increasing where there has been a population shift in jobs, so. I don't want to spend any money on consultants to tell me that a bus is empty. I mean, I think our planners or our staff should make that recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Commissioner May, what you're just talking about there with why, there would be times that a bus route to, say, Johnson Beach would make sense, but certainly wouldn't be in February.
Right.
What's been chapping me so much about the ECAT is that I'll drive through the west side and I'll see an empty bus over in Mayfair, or I'll see an empty bus, say, in Warrington somewhere, and then on the next stop of my trip, I'm in on Cervantes, and there's 15 people waiting to get on a bus.
Right.
That's the stuff that's just been driving me crazy about this. We have the data, and we have especially in the modern era, we've had the data in near real time. So yeah, your bus routes, out to the beaches, if that's what people need during the summertime. But bus route really primarily should be about getting people to their place of work and to their doctor's offices and things like that. So I'm less inclined, and I bring up the Floribama one because that was a gross misuse of a grant, to try to do things that is not what the people needed. Right. Empty buses running around in one place while people sit in the weather waiting for a bus to come at a place, where we could be running a second bus on that same route and then shaving their time down. Jonathan actually took the bus from his house in Bellevue to work one day, a couple of times actually, and it took him 2 hours and 15 minutes to get to work, whereas it takes him about 20 minutes to drive to work. Wow. Well, Jonathan, because he has a vehicle, he doesn't waste 2 hours of his day one way, not on the clock. That's 2 hours he's not getting, that an employee would not getting paid. So those routes that are focused in those areas, the Bellevue, Brownsville, Mayfair, those areas, you shouldn't have to wait 30 minutes to get to a bus while we've got empty buses running elsewhere.
Absolutely. And so let me respond a little bit. That I probably disagree with you. I think that public transportation is a mode of quality of life. And I agree with you. The primary purpose should be getting people back and forth to work, but it also should be giving citizens a better quality of life. And because a person doesn't have a car, or doesn't have the means to get to Perdido, to Johnson Beach, or they don't have the means to get to Pensacola Beach, doesn't mean that they don't deserve the opportunity for us to make it accessible to citizens. And so on summer months and when there's high demand months, when we want to keep, traffic congestion to a low going to Perdido, Doug, or we want to keep it Pensacola Beach, to me it makes sense to take your public transportation to give a better quality of life, whether that's reducing traffic or emissions, or whether it's just getting somebody to the beach. Or an area in which they have to work. We know that there are many service jobs on Pensacola Beach where people are dishwashers and landscapers, and they need it. I just don't think that you can continue to have the same route 12 months out the year and be efficient. To me, that's not a study. That's common sense to me that, there should be some months in which we adjust. There are certain times I can go down Davis Highway, and certain times I can't go down Davis Highway. I just got to know what time to go. And so that's just common sense.
And like most things, I can agree. You and I agree on 90% of it, and maybe a little bit of disagreement on some. But I certainly don't need a consultant to tell me what you just said either.
Right.
Especially in a seasonal community like ours. Now, maybe in New York City, January is the same as June, but certainly is not here in Escambia County. So I would hope that our staff would recognize that the permission is inherent in the position, the permission to take a look at those things and propose to us what your best business practices would be. Permission to do that study, to do that is inherent in your position, and we'd love to hear more about that, not just in terms of efficiencies of location, which means running the bus routes where the people who need to ride them are, but also in terms of a temporal relationship, the time relationship, running the bus routes where the people are, when they are, and when they need it. That's Absolutely. Our job, is to meet those needs. And I think that if you brought some of that back, you'd probably find that this board was very supportive of those kind of changes.
Yeah, and Doug, to this point, and I think that, Tanya, maybe we're just having this conversation, and hopefully it helps, but if I know that I can't build a community center in every neighborhood, but during the summer months, kids are not going to school, the buses are not running, how do they get to the community center? to get their 3 meals a day and to get some structured activity. How do the kids get moved out of Oakwood Terrace to Brownsville? They got to get on a bus. I mean, they're not going to work, but, you know, we can, whether we want to say that's a government responsibility or not, it is, because it's our responsibility to take care of all of the citizens. But we have to make those adjustments. So
Yes.
maybe, you know, when school is in and they're going to CAYs every morning, they're not trying to get to Brownsville Community Center, so we don't need to run the bus during school. Those are the type of efficiencies that I would like to see come forward. And to me, that deals with your outreach. It deals with knowing exactly where the need is, and that's what I would like to see. And, you know, I certainly could give recommendations on that, but that's not my job. I'd rather for the recommendations to come, and as you said, the board can decide as a whole whether or not they want to support that. But those are the things that I'm interested in. I will concur with, you know, Commissioner Underhill. You know, it bothers me if I'm seeing a bus with no one on it and
Yes,
just
sir.
riding around. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You know, of course, I would look at, Tanya, I think we've implemented the technology where we get some more data.
Yes, sir. Should be ready to launch in October.
Okay. So I think that can hopefully lead us in our decision-making process as we see the need in certain areas or the lack of need. I think you could look at, you know, I don't think that, although I hope they do, but employees of one of our larger entities rely on the bus to get to work every day on the beach. I mean, your custodial staff, your housekeepers, your wait staff, or at least some chefs and things like that, they rely on that. And we saw some of that data early on. I mean, it was very hard for them to get out there and get to work with the bridge being out. And some of the other areas of that come through that, you know, we've talked about reducing some of those routes. And every time we do, you know, you start hearing from people that rely on it.
Yes, sir.
You know, that's the elderly in the assisted living facility that use it to get to doctor's appointments and so I think there is a need, but if we can do it smarter, wiser, cheaper, and still provide service, I think that's what we need to strive for. And I would concur that not having a route out to Beulah, to this area's largest employer, I think that could stifle some of those that would rely on that, the opportunity to have a position out there. And just as we've said with some of the routes to the bases, there's a population that relies on that. It's not just to get those that are on base, off base. It's to get those that need to get onto the base for work, that don't have the means, that you know, may not be able to drive. I mean, it's not just a cost thing, but it gives them some independence. And so I think that talks to the quality of life that Commissioner May was talking about. And now I think we were talking about funding a little bit earlier. We are not getting funding from the TPO though anymore though, right?
No, sir, not for our current annual service, no, sir.
Okay. And I would like to focus more on the Escambia County side of things, making sure that we get that. I think if those in Santa Rosa feel there's a need, I think they could come to us and ask us. They'll clearly know more about that, but you know, I think we've you know, done some good things in getting the routes to Century and things like that. And
Mr. Chairman.
yes, sir.
When I came on this board, Commissioner, who preceded Commissioner Underhill, Gene Valentino, talked a lot about regional transportation, and we did studies, and really, even with the TPO, it's never been able to come into fruition because of the mass undertaking of how would you fund it, and how would you collectively join these two municipal bodies together. I mean, we're almost always underfunded here in trying to meet it. I mean, I'm not saying that it's never, but that's a daunting task, particularly when you look at the ideology and needs of a rural community in which Santa Rosa is still rural versus, you know, where you seek success in public transportation, and that's in urban core. And so to mix that urban core with that rural, to me, is going to be a daunting task. But
I'd say a lot of us is pretty rural. You know, I mean, we.
well, a lot of us is rural, but as Commissioner O'Neill said, in the rural routes, you need to look at capacity of how many people are actually riding. I mean, you know, it's actually rural, but if you're running a bus to a rural area for 2 people, I mean, does that make sense? I mean, would it even be cheaper to go to our community transportation partners and pay them to take them in a car? I mean, even though it's $30 a trip or $40 a trip, that's probably cheaper than running a bus all day and only having 3 people going. I mean, there are other modes of transportation. We just have to become more creative. I'm not saying that it's not necessary to get that person from a urban area to a rural area, but the mode in which we get them there, we may not be doing it the most efficient way.
But I think part of that, though, is that what incentive is there then for me not to turn over my keys and use that same system, you know, especially if we're paying for it, to use it?
Well, I tell you.
You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but you know,
I mean, it's like if you open that door, then now we're just providing door-to-door service for everybody. You know,
well,
I know things have evolved.
That's what I'm saying. You got
things are evolving. So
you
it's
got to
not
be
just that.
creative, and then you got to think 10 years from today,
Right.
when neither one of us will be sitting here. We should, as we grow into a metro area, public transportation is the way. I mean, you can't build enough road. We want to get people off the streets. I mean, that's what a growing and a progressive city wants, is to get people using public transportation. I mean, that's how you're going to grow a community. I mean, how are you going to stop congestion on 9 Mile Road? You're not going to widen the road anymore. You're going to reduce the amount of cars that get there. And as our town grows to the north, I mean, we'll just have to adjust with them. I mean, so, I mean, any transportation planning person will tell you the ultimate goal is to get more people off the road than to put more people on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I've relied on public transportation before. You know, I mean, it's to, you know, okay, I got 10 minutes to walk to the stop. I know that there's going to be a train coming every 4 or 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. You know, you build that in, and then it drops you a couple blocks from where you need to be, and you're there. I mean, so I've used it, I've relied on it, and I see the value for those. Honestly, though, we have smaller populations than some of these other areas. Although there is some reliance on it, it's probably small.
Absolutely is. But at one time, Tampa, St. Pete, in that whole corridor where they're putting the rail where they've connected, at one time they were small. I'm saying that you have to plan for the future too. I mean,
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's how will we look? How will Okaloosa, Santa Rosa, and Escambia to the Mobile line look in 20 years? I mean,
And so,
that's
you know,
an
as we talk
important thing.
about transition the fleet to electric vehicles, there's a lot more that goes into that than just buying the buses.
Absolutely.
It's, you know, it's the charging stations, it's, you know, I mean, everything else. So,
When we get that bill passed, we're going to have 500 billion in the electric station, so we're going to be all right.
well, there we go. So, you know, I think, you know, we're focused on transitioning the fleet to electric vehicles. I think we could, in terms of capital projects, I mean, I support that, but I think we could also stand to just support getting new vehicles.
Yes, sir. And Commissioners, we can bring back to you all a proposal for recommended routes, recommendations separate from the TDP, as far as efficiencies on some routes that may need to be streamlined. We can bring that back to you.
Sure.
And Robert, I mean, you know, to a point, and I think you're probably hearing consensus on the board. I think we've had the same conversation. I mean, as I said, when I got on the board, it was Commissioner Valentino talking about regional transportation, smaller buses, reduction of routes, increasing routes. That's kind of been the real conversation. I think at some point you have to act on ideas, or at least put them in place to at least implement them. And so, I mean, I like this, but, those recommendations, like the smaller buses and the different routes, Tanya, where are we on that?
Commissioner, I believe our last board meeting, we did do you voted to approve us to purchase a couple of cutaways for our fixed route. We are in the process of diversifying the fleet. We've purchased some replacement buses as well. It's just one stage in this process. It's not the only stage of looking at that and looking at which routes, instead of using the larger buses, can we use the smaller vehicles on. So we are internally looking at those things of being a little more efficient fuel-wise on which vehicles we're using on which routes.
And Commissioner Bender touched on it, Tanya. We always have questions. I mean, I get public transportation the way I look at a public park. I mean, they don't necessarily pay for themselves and ROI with dollars, but with quality of life, they do. But how do we increase revenue? I mean, do we increase the signage or the advertising? I mean, what are the creative ways that you see in your world where we can increase revenue?
There are opportunities, of course, on the advertising side. I would probably say better, it's not more so of increasing your revenue, of just being more efficient with the revenue that we have. We can increase more revenue to get new service or to get new vehicles, new capital. But overall, you want to be the most efficient as possible with the funds that we were receiving. I do know that there's an infrastructure bill that's, of course, on the federal level, and those monies will start flowing down that will benefit transit, but they also come with certain requirements as well for those particular projects. So we are looking at other ways, trying to think outside the box of being more productive with the funds that we currently have to run the service. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just real quick, I would say that for me, probably one of the top priorities would be to getting the Baptist Hospital realignment. I think that's going to come up a lot quicker than we anticipate. Baptist Hospital is the second largest employer, as shown in this list, with 7,300 employees, plus the public need to get to medical service. So I hope that we are ready to go and prepared for when that hospital launches.
Yes, sir. Actually, when the TDP started over a year ago, my staff have met with their staff, Mr. Porter, over there, as far as looking at the potential services that would need to be transitioned over once that is done. Yes, sir.
And Robert, you make a good point. And to the few friends I do have in the state that do public transportation and many outside the state, you're right, our major stakeholders should be stakeholders. Such as Baptist, Navy Federal, and when I say just stakeholders, Tanya, I mean that they should be able to contribute resources, and those resources, and it's not uncommon for adjusted routes and services that the employer contribute financially. And so, I mean, sitting down and making a route for Navy Federal without asking Navy Federal to subsidize it or Baptist. And I love the consultant shaking his head because
that was part of when we did the financial planning, Commissioner. Real quick, this, TDP is a forward-looking document. We established the existing system as our baseline, so that's why we did not look at the existing system in great detail. But Commissioner, that is exactly correct. Every proposal, whether it's to Milton or to Navy Federal part of the funding equation was partnerships.
Right.
They work. Star Metro, Florida State University, I negotiated those agreements,
Right.
Employee bus pass programs, not to go too far down the road. A good example is Polk Transit in Polk County. They have pass programs with Legoland, the hospital, the school district. And so, yes, I fully agree that, and we've tried to factor that in to the extent to again, a forward-looking document having partnerships being part of the funding equation.
And I appreciate you saying that, Tanya. I wish you would dig, because in this post-COVID era, and particularly in school districts across the country, find themselves, without bus drivers and moving transportation, and there's opportunity that you can subcontract with school districts in providing that transportation with children when there's Commissioner Hill was saying, the bus is not crowded. Well, if these are dead times when people are getting out of school districts already paying this much for transportation, there are some creative ways in which we could supplement our system by being creative and looking at those best models. And obviously, our consultant friend here has a lot of knowledge of that. But those are the creative things that I've seen at our conferences, Robert, that we go to, and just talking to other people. That I don't believe that we can continue to operate a mass transit on the revenue side the way that we did 20 years ago or since 2012. Well, let's think out of the box and take a risk. If it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. But there are so many creative things in which I'm not saying you'll ever make it cost neutral, because you will not. It's going to always be subsidized by a gas tax. But we can certainly at some point, you're not going to generate every efficiency. You can't go fire every bus driver. The bus doesn't crank up. I mean, there's maybe a percentage that you can reduce in staffing. I don't know. I would love to see that if that was the efficiency you were talking about. I've said we ought to reduce 20%. I've said that since we were elected. And if there is an efficiency, let's find it. But let's find revenue. Let's grow revenue without taxing the taxpayers.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Underhill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do truly hope we do not go back to revitalizing the comments and efforts to create a regional mass transit again, because the facts the facts of the day then and the facts of the day now are the same. It's just not realistic. Now, if Santa Rosa County is booming, they're certainly growing. If Santa Rosa County elected officials believe that there is a need for public transportation in Santa Rosa County, and they were to reach out to ECAT to possibly do a fee-for-service where we could, see some, that might be cheaper for them than building their own system, then be more than happy to have that conversation. But much like a vampire, I'm not coming in the house without an invitation. That's between the people of Santa Rosa County and their elected officials. No interest in having that conversation in terms of us expanding the Escambia County system to meet the needs of Santa Rosa County residents at the cost of Escambia County. Our gas tax. So definitely, and I'm not implying that you're implying that. I'm just saying, and getting it very clearly on the record where I stand with regard to that. And again, expansion and thinking in terms of longer bus routes actually means longer wait times sitting at the bus stops. And so that's the wrong direction to go. And then Commissioner Bender, I wanted to speak especially to something that you just said that really surprised me. You mentioned, and I'm not implying any ill intent from the statement, but our purpose of mass transit is to provide the service that is needed by the people. And if we ever get to a point where the purpose of mass transit is to socially engineer our society, and as you said, get them out of their vehicles or turn over their keys, then we are in a very, very bad place for America.
I was saying that that's what it could lead to if we did that. I wasn't advocating for that.
Okay, so
I was saying that if you start offering door-to-door service, then I now have no incentive possibly that I'm just going to rely on it. If you do away with the route and just say, hey, we'll just get a car for you to come pick you up and take you there. That's what I was saying.
Well, that's good. Glad to hear that. Certainly, while there's certainly many Americans who choose to not engage in automobile ownership, there are other Americans who, by necessity, are not automobile owners, and I can certainly recognize some public interest in assisting those folks to live in that lifestyle. But at no time should the government be trying to incentivize what a handful of elected people might perceive to be a desired lifestyle on the masses. So I'm glad to hear that that's not where you were going with that. Thank you.
And I think the other thing about Milton was that's what I was saying, is that I don't think we should be looking to expand.
Yeah, I think we're in complete agreement on that. And like I said, Santa Rosa County, if I were a Santa Rosa County commissioner and I wanted mass transit, one of the first things I would do is reach out to ECAT and see if it couldn't be purchased cheaper as a service from ECAT than building their own. But again, that's between the people of Santa Rosa County and their elected officials. Certainly is not something that I would be supportive of here in Escambia County. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, Board, Marie Mott just came in, so I'm going to ask for Marie and Eric Gilmore to come up, give us a little update.
We finished with this subject? Are we done?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless,
Robert, for the record, I want to be on record. Mass transportation, public transportation is not door-to-door service going to the neighborhood. It's mass transportation. And if anybody thinks that mass transportation stays the same way, it doesn't. There are so many factors when it comes to mass transportation and the benefits of it, from the ecosystem to economics to quality of life. So
No,
I didn't want anybody to get that misunderstanding.
No,
or
no, and like I said, I've
misinterpretation.
relied on it, so I mean, I understand that. You know, I mean, I've been there, so.
Commissioners, I just wanted to let you know, we just wanted to make sure we provided you this information before it goes to FDOT in September, so we'll come back to you for a final vote.
Thank you, Tanya. Okay. Thank you. As Marie comes up, I'll just, board, we had another one of our regular meetings that we have with the hospital officials and Department of Health, and going off a little bit of what was said during the mayor's press conference Monday. I think, Jeff, probably a lot was covered in your coffee yesterday. Yeah. So I did want to use this opportunity to help spread some of the messaging that we're discussing, what we're seeing locally, regionally. As I said last week, we are seeing mid-90s of the hospital. Those that are in the hospital are unvaccinated, and so we are trying to get that message out, and so I've asked Marie to come talk about that. So. Thank you, Marie.
Right. Thank you. And what the hospitals are reporting is consistent with the statewide data. You know, again, just to kind of review for those who are unaware or haven't seen this in a while, Florida Health COVID-19.gov website is a source of information. There's a Friday weekly report of data from the Department of Health that's put there on every week, and also both locators for vaccine and for testing, and those are statewide locators, which include information here in Escambia County, but for people that need to locate outside the county, that's an option there as well. Also information on the CDC COVID data tracker website, and the easiest way to get there is to put those words into your search bar, CDC COVID data tracker. Again, just updating last week's slides, including the most recent weekly data. We're seeing the cumulative positivity there. But again, more kind of real time is the weekly positivity and case reports. So you can see we're still in that 20+% positive range for test returns. And the weekly number of positive cases consistently rising over the last several weeks. And again, this is just kind of another way of expressing that as a rate of cases per 100,000 of the population. You can see that rising up as well. I did look yesterday at the CDC's website, and their reported case rate through August the 9th was a little over 600 cases per 100,000. On the other end of the spectrum, an encouraging thing is vaccines are going up. So we are still encouraging people to get vaccinated. As you mentioned, Monday, everybody got together to kind of make that group message hopefully resonate a little bit more. I also had the opportunity to do a radio show yesterday with Chandra Smiley, and again, we pushed that message out together. So that's important.
And Board, Marie only has a couple of minutes, but I do want to push this out though. Locally, if you go back to that percentage, our over 65 population is strong, and also what we're seeing in the hospital are the younger patients.
Yes.
So I mean that's correlating to the unvaccinated, that's correlating to the younger population. I guess we don't have the exact demographics of those who are in the hospital in terms of age range, but I think the average age is around 40. Mid-40s. Say mid-40s. And so I didn't know if you want to expand on that real quick.
Yeah, and again, we're seeing that across the state. 20 to 49 is the bulk of cases and hospitalizations, if I recall correctly. And most of them, like in the 90% unvaccinated. So about 94, 95% of
And is
cases
this
are
one
unvaccinated.
dose or is this fully vaccinated?
These are minimum of one dose,
Okay.
so
Well,
not fully vaccinated.
Listen, just from this, we can see that people are going out and getting it.
Right.
And, you know, it was taking us 2 weeks to step up 1%, and we've now stepped up 3% in 3 weeks. So, you know,
Yes, I mean, in the spring, sometimes I was seeing, a month go by before we could get 1,000 people vaccinated. And now we're doing that in a couple of days. So that's a significant increase. I did have the conversation with some of my staff the other day. They were wondering, why the fully vaccinated needle wasn't moving as quickly. But remember, we've got that 3-week to 4-week interval before somebody becomes
fully vaccinated.
has that second shot. So we're seeing these go up in the past couple of weeks. So we'll probably start to see that other needle move in another 2 weeks.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Again, this is just a kind of a weekly uptake of vaccine, so you can again see the trend line and just the weekly numbers significantly go up the last 2 weeks there, 3 weeks.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Marie, is there any guidance or anything that's come out about folks that were vaccinated with the J&J shot, about a booster shot or anything like that?
Not yet. We are watching and waiting for booster guidance and for, I know there's been some media information related to that. But in terms of what the authorizations are, it's still just for the vaccines as emergency authorizations are presented, so.
Nothing specific about the J&J, though? Okay.
Not specifically yet, no. So.
And just, I think you have the ability to essentially pick which provider, which dose of the shot that you want. We have all three readily available, so if you didn't want Johnson & Johnson, you wanted Moderna or Pfizer, you could have that choice. Is that right?
Right, all three vaccines are widely available in the community. At the health department, we are offering all three vaccines as well. So, when you come in, you can choose on the spot, which one you want. Obviously, if you're starting with one, that's where you're going to get your second dose with that one. But in terms of availability, again, we're seeing, commercial pharmacies, grocery stores that have pharmacies, community health, all the major medical systems in the community, and some of the smaller private pharmacies and practices offering vaccine now. So it's pretty easy to find and quick to get access to.
Perfect. For people that maybe don't have a primary care physician, I guess you can come to community clinic. We haven't seen a large number or hardly any reactions to these vaccines. Can you just speak on that quickly?
Well,
On just what we are seeing. I mean, I think it's safe to say that it's safe. I mean, I think most of us up here have had it. I mean, the military's requiring it. So.
Right. I mean, when you get vaccinated, we do still have the 15-minute monitoring period. I can't tell you when the last time I heard of anybody having any kind of critical reaction was, if at all. So, that it's I guess a chance, but it's very minimal occurring as far as any information I have.
Perfect. Okay. I don't know if you talked about, but we are just encouraging vaccinated people that are eligible to get vaccinated, and that we have that availability of access.
All right. And I think, again, a really important kind of piece of telling that story is just the number of cases that are coming back for unvaccinated people versus vaccinated people. So 94% unvaccinated to about 6% unvaccinated. So that's a good solid A if you were to be in school getting your paper graded that way. So
And then, of course, we're still suggesting that prevention is still important.
Absolutely. Yep. just a few quick messages related to that. If you are having any type of symptoms, whether it turns out to be COVID or not, please get evaluated and stay home if you're sick so you don't share whatever it is that you may have come across. Hand washing is good for the prevention of a lot of things, so I would encourage that regardless of what type of situation we're in. And of course, staying apart from others as much as possible. So.
All right, perfect. Board, any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Marie, for coming down. I know you got to get going.
Thank you,
So
yeah.
I think we've made it. Okay, Eric, I'll let you, if you have anything to expand or offer on that. and
I
then,
think she touched on everything that we needed to cover, but I will let you guys know, since I was here last, it was asked that we somehow separate the fatalities and put those out there. That's a number that's not going to be easily attainable. The hospitals have a definition. The medical examiner, even contacting Dr. Orleski, she doesn't even have a clear definitive number. It'll be partial information after talking with her. But the hospitals have agreed, after our coffee with the commissioner, to break out the pediatrics versus the adults, and you'll start seeing that today. Sacred Heart's already done that. West Florida Baptist, we called them. They're going to do that today as well. So we do have 11 pediatrics in the hospital today. And then the rest are adults, and I think we had a total of 344. So you'll see that on the dashboard today broke out. The dashboard's already being worked on right now. If you look at it right now, there's already some numbers of, and the hospital said, well, to be fair, if we're going to break that out, then at least show the % vaccinated to push that out there. And that number is actually on there as well. So it shows the 46% at least one dose, but the 38% totally vaccinated. So those numbers are on there as of right now. Then the dashboard's still being worked on, but that will be on there today.
Eric, how many pediatric cases do we have?
11. There's 9 at Sacred and 2 at West Florida, I believe.
And are they able to give any additional data? I heard something the other day was that a lot of them, much like I knew someone who was vaccinated, who caught it, very mild symptoms and everything, and has recovered, but he was going through chemotherapy, so
Right.
compromised immune
Immunocompromised,
system. And so how about, with the kids? I mean, of course, you have to be 12, I think, to receive it now.
12 to receive it, yes.
How many of them are 12 or over, or how many of them are unfortunately having to go through something else right now?
They didn't break it down that far. They're just giving me pediatric under the age of 18 and then the adult. So they just want to do an aggregate number. And that, to them, they felt like that gave a snapshot of the children, if we're worried about the children.
Sure,
So.
oh, yeah. No.
I think so 50% of the ones we did on Saturday, Robert, were children in Brownsville. I think we did 112, and 50% of those were young.
And that's great. And actually, I meant to mention that, of course, this week's the first week of school, I think. Some went back Monday, some went back Tuesday, some went back Wednesday, some went back today.
Yeah,
So it's been the week of first,
we'll see.
but hopefully, everyone stays safe in that. And we saw last year, I don't think we saw wide outbreaks in classes.
Right.
And I hope that continues with this variant. So
We pray.
we pray.
I mean,
So
a lot of things are out of our jurisdiction. I mean, it's,
Another one of those that's outside of our jurisdiction are storms.
Well, before I go there, is everybody okay with the data that I presented? Is that okay? Understanding that the fatality, the death rate's not going to be easily attainable. So just make sure
do we
everybody.
have any idea what the sorry?
No, sir, I don't. Everybody's got different case definitions, and that was the problem. Different case definitions and everything. Yeah, do you contribute the heart attack with the COVID because they had COVID, or was it a underlying condition they were going to have a heart attack anyway? So, and even trying to go to the medical examiner that would be the last person this individual sees to see if she can give me a true definition, and even she was having a hard time placing that. So,
Yeah, it's difficult, man.
Okay.
It's
but I think with
somewhat
the data
political.
we've put out, I think that's going to help out and show pediatric, adult, what we have here, percentage vaccinated, not vaccinated. So,
well, what we do know, people are dying.
yes, sir, we do. We do know that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we do know that.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to take this moment of personal privilege to thank Eric Gilmore every week well, we did it weekly, and then we started doing it monthly, but every single episode of Coffee with the Commissioner, he gets up early and gets on there, and was really helpful and instrumental in working with the hospitals to get some of this important data released. not only this time, but before, he worked with them and others to get the recovered data put on before, which I thought was very important. But appreciate your assistance. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
Chip's helped with that as well. Appreciate your assistance, and I also want to publicly thank all those presidents of the hospital taking their time. I've had so many people reach out to me and thank me for asking those questions, because a lot of those questions they had themselves. So appreciate that, and appreciate David Haro and the office back there for putting it on Facebook and really getting it out there. Thank you.
Thank you. The biggest message yesterday was all the vent patients were unvaccinated. That was the big message. They were on a vent, they were typically unvaccinated, and the majority in the hospital are unvaccinated. So that was the big message yesterday.
Did I hear you say correctly that only 38% are fully vaccinated in Escambia
That is
County?
correct. According to the CDC site that we're pulling our number from, 38% are fully vaccinated with both shots. So, and as Marie alluded to, it might be that Delta for the 3 weeks waiting for the second shot.
And is that just 12 and over? That's of the population 12 and over?
Total population, 12 and over.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right, well, that makes
Yes,
it a
sir.
little bit better.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Storms. So we do have a storm out there, tropical depression now, Fred. And it was downgraded overnight because it went across mainland and tore it apart a little bit. But they expect it to reform out in the Florida Straits and turn into a tropical storm sometime later tomorrow, late tonight to tomorrow. There's a lot of warm water out there for the Gulf. They anticipate, if you follow the skinny little black line shows it going somewhere just east of Apalachicola. But we are still in the cone of uncertainty, which goes from Mobile all the way to Jacksonville. So with history of last year with Sally and the unknown, hopefully there's enough steering currents, and the models seem to tighten up. So when they get tighter, when all the spaghetti models tighten up, we want that to happen. So that gives us a little bit more confidence in the path that it'll take. The only uncertainty really is the intensification. How intense will it get? Waters are warm. If the thing slows down, it could very much turn into a hurricane. But we're having an 11 o'clock meeting today with our community partners and Mobile Weather. They're going to give us a briefing at 11 o'clock. After we hear Mobile Weather's briefing, we're going to have a discussion in the room about trigger points, any protective measures we need to start looking at taking, and identifying those things. Because once again, we're going to the weekend, and it's never on a Monday, right? So anyway, so we want to make sure all our partners are sped up, understand what their role is going to be, and that if we have to do any of these, pull these triggers, that everybody's ready to do their job. So.
And let's, what the models are saying is when could it be in the Panhandle area?
So the Panhandle area, if I remember correctly, you'll start seeing the winds and some of the rain bands. And of course, if the track holds true, we'll be on the west side, which is,
Right.
You want to be on the west side. It's one of the better sides. I think it's late Sunday night, early Monday morning is what we'll start seeing some effects of winds, some gusts and everything. Of course, along the coast, you'll see it first immediately, and then more inland as Monday goes on, or late Sunday night into early Monday morning.
So we're saying 4 days out?
4 days out.
Is when this could be coming to the
To the
general
Panhandle.
area?
Yes, correct.
And again, the severity, the intensity, we don't know what that might be. It could be a storm, it could be a depression.
They say a storm, but we're going to prepare for something a little more aggressive.
But the other thing is that it's going to turn up the Gulf pretty good.
That's correct.
And so,
Rip currents are going to be, regardless, we're going to see rip currents. We'll see some rain bands that'll wrap around, and we'll have winds on the coast. I don't think we're going to have anything significant if that track holds true and maintains what it says.
perfect.
You think we'll get those rain bands this weekend or the beginning of next week?
Late Sunday. We'll start getting them late Sunday into Monday.
Monday.
So,
And if anything changes, of course, I'm sending out daily updates. As I get the latest, I send it out, and you guys get it as well, so you know what's going on.
but we don't expect this to be heavy rain like we've seen with
No,
other
no.
events. I mean,
This thing's
it would
supposed
just be
to, it's not supposed to drag over us. It's supposed to hit and go. So
Okay.
we should not, but we always plan for those things.
Did I hear we need a new boat or something? I mean, heading into hurricane season.
Not a bay boat, not a bay boat or a fire boat. We're talking about, some water rescue boats, river rescue boats with 25 horse Johnsons on it. We would like to get some of those because Bristol Park, we know the areas. Bristol Park, the apartments downtown, we always have to go in those flood waters, and that's something we're looking at trying to get for the fire department to help us out. So, 3 John boats with 25 horses on the back would help out tremendously.
Okay. Well, we might want to look into trying to get those.
Hey, Eric, who's your senior water safety guy that would be operating that's saying that you need those, that's the right setup?
The senior, so I've talked to the Coast Guard and their punt team, and I'm correlating off what they brought for Sally and how we utilize their resources and assets.
Okay, so, in our last storm, Jonathan Owens and I used our race boats as part of the recovery efforts
Yes,
at
sir.
one of our apartment complex, our Sea-Doos.
Yes, sir.
Introducing an outboard engine into a very, into an environment.
Depends
in
on the
which-
draft and shit.
In
You're
which you
right.
have individuals in the water
You're
who
right.
are not familiar with boats, may also be introducing additional risk.
Hazards.
I'd like to have a more thorough conversation with you about what.
Perfect.
What modern best business practices for water safety and water recovery.
Okay.
They may be the right thing.
Okay.
But especially with what I saw at Forest Creek Apartments,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been the wrong thing for that place at that time. Now, granted, the clapped out Yamaha, that had not been properly maintained, that the fire department had, was also the wrong thing.
Yes, sir.
But let's talk through that a little bit more. And certainly we need to have the ability to do water recovery. A commissioner and his aide riding around with a couple of jet skis, racing skis on the back of his, as the storm passes over is probably not a good policy. There are probably better ways to do that.
Right.
And nobody wants to see me in a wetsuit anyway. So, but yeah, we need to, I'd like to talk with you in a little more detail about that. We have resources available to us, and actually there are federal dollars that are available for that you should probably be aware of.
Perfect. Thank you.
Let's have that discussion. Just get with Connor or Jonathan, and let's get that on my schedule.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
And Robert, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I don't know if we need 1 boat or 3 boats or 5 boats, but I mean, a part of that conversation needs to be, how do we fix the flooding? I mean, we're putting money in the boats. Let's put money into those systemic places that flood that could be avoidable if we put some money in the infrastructure to address the flooding. I mean, that's real important to me. If we're gonna spend a couple $100,000 on boats, spend a couple $1 million on fixing the flooding problem.
I agree. I've got a couple projects that I'm working on in the Ferry Pass area to alleviate the flooding, and so it sounds like I've got your support then.
Oh, absolutely, you got my support. It's not even my district in Forest Creek, but it's been systemic. People have been flooding for 20 years. I mean, why am I going to buy boats?
Yeah.
I'm not going to vote to buy boats to go into Forest Creek. We know the systemic problem. I'll vote to spend some money to fix the flooding, or I'll vote to relocate them.
And it's not just flooding. I mean, there was a.
Oh, I know that.
No,
That's
no,
part
I'm
of
just
it.
saying, there was a water rescue last weekend where I think we rely on Santa Rosa County to come over and get the people off the pontoon boat that are stuck in the Escambia River and.
Right.
And,
Oh, yeah. Oh, I get all that, Robert. I mean, my only point is, in the messaging, and we got to,
Right.
for flooding, for Bristol Creek or Forest Creek, I'm fine with it. I mean, people, we don't want anyone to drown, and we got a lot of rivers, and we live on the Gulf, so, I'm not going to be in opposition. I'm saying that we have to put money into fixing those flooding problems where those people are being trapped.
and I agree.
And neither one of those places are in my district, but it's important that, how many times do you have to define insanity if we just keep doing the same thing? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just as a note, we are placing sand in all the usual spots, so going into the weekend, it will be available.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Let you get your report. Board, I'll go ahead and, let's go and move up the health benefits overview.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Of key interest to me, and I have to be going at 11, so after this, can we talk about the county administrator search? Because I have a quitting time at 11.
Sure. So you want to take that up now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll take
'cause I
it
may
now
not
then.
be here.
And then we'll do benefits after that? So, Wes?
Commissioner, thank you. I put this on the agenda, and it's been a little bit, it's been about 2 months, and a professional administrator search could take as much as a year. And so I want to give the board the opportunity to go ahead and have that discussion and maybe get some direction as to how you would like for us to proceed in that regard. And with that, I will let you guys discuss it.
Commissioner May?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's time. We've had a period. I think we should go out for a county administrator search. We have some key vacancies for some key personnel positions, and I think we need to bring in the best of the best. And not saying that our current guy is not the best of the best, and some of our current people, but we do have some vacancies that I think that we need to get field and get working on that. I mean, to me, a search firm doesn't cost any more to search for a county administrator and throw in that we're searching for the best vacancy for whatever key positions that we have.
Sure.
I mean, and bring the best people into this Escambia County that we possibly can bring.
Yep.
So I support, I support where Wes is in putting out a search for me, county administrator and key personnel.
Yeah. I've had a search firm that has recently completed the one for Jefferson County, Alabama, reach out to me. I think if you can successfully find someone to run at least a county coming out of bankruptcy, hopefully we can find one for Escambia County.
Well, when he puts out the RFQ, RFP, I mean, we did this before. You're probably going to have 10 firms
Yeah.
that are going to apply. And I mean, I think we'll just have to figure out which firm that we would want to use. But I don't have anybody in mind, Robert.
No, and like I said, I just, one person that contacted me said, hey, we'd be interested, but no, I think we go through the RFP process and see who we get.
Absolutely. I support that.
Commissioner Underhill?
Thank you. Yeah, it was very noteworthy during when Wes was elevated to this position. He stood at that podium right there, and he said very clearly that he was standing up to do his duty to his county, but was not interested in the long-term position, and which we all know Wes long enough to know that is very much in keeping with his ethics. I wouldn't have expected. Actually, I wouldn't have asked the questions if I didn't expect it. If I didn't already know that was really what the answer was going to be. Based on past performance. So, but with that comes a responsibility of this board to acknowledge that he's doing a duty, and while certainly the pay bump that goes with it is pleasant. That's not. Honestly, especially when you consider the situation of the roads in this county, we really need him desperately in that other role. The right play, I think, is not to put our thumb on the scale in any way and just go ahead and put out an RFP for a professional that can do a nationwide search. And I'd be particularly interested. We have other significant positions that are vacant at this time. I would not be averse to adding those other or hearing from the applicants or from the respondents, as perhaps as options. Finding us some folks for those other positions, but certainly the base contract should be finding us a county administrator, a nationwide search. I think that's a fairly easy move going forward. I don't know if we need a board discussion about changing the criteria. I don't have any problem with the current criteria the way it is. I think that's appropriate for what for what the industry. That'll get the right people in the industry nationwide. But if any other commissioners feel like there's something else that ought to be changed on there, be happy to have that discussion as well.
I think we have time for that. I mean, we're going out hopefully for an RFP for the search firm, and then they can bring that to us.
So the smart play would be then have staff go ahead and generate the RFP and put that in front, and then work with each of our 5 offices to see if the criteria, if there's any proposals for changes to the criteria, so that then when it comes to us for discussion, the 5 of us, if any of us have proposals, we've already had a chance to staff that properly, and then we can up or down those changes and then vote on the contract, on the RFP.
Madam Attorney.
Just be aware there is actually an ordinance that memorializes the county administrator position as well as the statewide County Administrators Act. So while we do have some discretion to maybe add some things, it may require amending your ordinance.
Yep, that wouldn't be a problem if that was what was appropriate for the people of Escambia County. Thanks.
I know I've already had some other people reach out talking about qualifications and instead of required, is it recommended or things like that. We can look at those things to make sure that we have a broad applicant pool that we still feel can do the work. Okay, so Wes, you got direction on that then? Okay. All right, let's go with the health benefits then.
Good morning. So we're here to talk about overview of all of our health benefits. With us, I have our benefits manager, Melissa Eckroth. Also have Kevin Scroggins and Melanie Rogers and Marty Stanley. They are the executive for the USI account. So what we're passing out to you is the colorful sheet that we already provided you before, but we did want to give updated numbers. So it's same information, but a little updated numbers for that. So today we wanted to go over and kind of concentrate on that sheet. We did provide a lot of supporting documentation already, but Kevin Scroggins is going to be able to explain what all is on that sheet.
Hi, I'm Kevin Scroggins. Do I need to give you my pedigree or anything like that, or just, okay. If you look at this placement, I try to make this as succinct as possible.
So we're starting with the one with the orange bar on it?
Yes, sir. The top of it where it starts to talk about per employee per year. I know there were a bunch of attachments on the website. If we need to dive into any of those, I have them in my binder. But what I try to do in the beginning is, I was hired in March of 2018 through an RFP process. I try to lay out the financials on the top from 2017 down. The most important piece is to really focus on the per employee per year cost. If you follow the waterfall across, it's giving you a rolling 12 months. It's telling you the average number of employees at if you look at 2017, it's 1776. The budget was 20.8 million. Your budget per employee per year was 11,740, and we actually came in a little bit less on the cost per employee per year. That we were at 99.6% of budget. And if you follow that waterfall down, it can show you 18. If you look at the net cost per employee per year, that's probably the most concerning, is that your cost was at 11,693 per employee per year. Then it went to 12,412 per employee per year. 19 wasn't that bad. We actually leveled off the budget and came in at 14,163. 2020 last year was horrible. We had some of the largest claim year in Escambia since I've been involved with Escambia, and we came in at 113% of the budget. And then in 2021, we're projected at 16,104. That's an annualized number. That's based on 6 months of claims, and then we forecast it and bake it out through the end of the year. So this is all of our underwriting actuarial data around the financials of the plan. It's a lot, and I'll pause if there's any questions on that, or I can keep going.
Robert?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. So the top part of what you've handed, it's got, one of the columns is claimants over 275K?
Yes, sir.
All right. The 100K aggregating specific, what exactly?
That means that if the specific claims go over, if a couple of the claims or 3 or 4 of the claims go over the specific amount, over the 100,000, so if there was 275 spec, and if it reached 375, 2 of the claims, then the stop loss coverage would kick in.
Okay, so if that number was reduced to claimants over 100,000, would that number greatly increase? I mean,
yes, sir.
Greatly increase?
The premium or the number of claims?
The number of claimants.
Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity.
Yes. If you drop that spec to 100 and then had an aggregating spec of 100, if you look down, sir, at page, on this 2020 at the blue right here, in 2020 there were 33 claimants that have counted for 2.7 million. 27 claimants were over the 50% of the specific. So 50% of your specific would have been roughly $125,000. So you would have had 27 claims over 125,000.
In 2020?
Yes, sir.
How does that compare to other agencies, other counties, cities that y'all do work for? I mean, is
2020, you were probably right in line with the benchmark because of COVID. Your population is a little bit, the manual rates are a little bit higher. You have an older population, and then you also have retiree coverage. So your specific stop loss is probably about 15% higher than most counties and cities. The stop loss premium.
I didn't think the retirees had a huge effect on the pool. I thought that they're...
Well, I was going to ask about that because I think they listed some of the claimants out, and I think 3 or 4 of them were retirees, either retirees or their spouses.
Yeah.
And so...
Mr. Berry, your retiree, if you want to jump there, I can show you on the back. The retiree cost was 31% above the active cost for 2020. And
And forgive me, I hadn't seen this handout before, so it's hard to, I mean.
I'm sorry.
There's a lot, this,
it's at the bottom. It's
Yeah.
the maroon. We try to color code it.
yeah, I
It
mean, it's a
says-
good handout, I'm just saying, even if I'd seen it when we started the meeting, it might have been a little more helpful if we'd gotten it at 9 o'clock to glance at while we're up here, but, okay, where,
I'm sorry, I thought all of this was delivered on the to the attachments were delivered to you.
I mean, it's maybe the raw data is probably detailed in the backup, but this is a lot easier. It's a lot easier when it's put together like this. Okay, I'm sorry. So the
I'm
bottom
sorry.
of the red area.
The retiree, the red area at the bottom on the back is about the retiree cost. I put that in there because it impacts your stop loss. It's already impacting your life coverage, and
What are the gross dollars that we're talking about? Is it a huge? How much of our overall?
So you're expected to spend in 2021 about $26 million.
Right.
In 2022, there's some couple options, but we think it's going to go up to around $28,500,000. If you look at are you asking the net dollars on the retirees?
Yeah, how much of our? I mean, the percentages are one thing. If we're talking about 5 retirees, then it's not financially maybe as big a deal, but.
The retiree cost, you want all in on the total claims cost?
Yeah, just curious how big a part of the pie are they making up?
Let me see, I think it's. The statute provision, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I should have known. A net global budget of $286,000 or $430 per employee per year. It's putting a strain on the budget of $668,000 based on 2,000 employees.
All right,
So
where are you at on this?
I'm at the bottom again on the pink, on the red, on the
Okay.
retiree coverage.
All right.
So the spend on the employee contributions for, and because of the statute, retiree.
I'm sorry, and just being a layperson, what exactly does it mean by saying putting a strain on the net global budget of 286? Does that mean it's 286,000 additional? That's only 1% of what we're spending. So that's.
It's $286,000 more per employee per year. So it's almost 20% more than what the actives are paying.
286,000 per employee per year? That's not what you're. That's
No,
not what you're
$286,000 more.
Okay,
is the
430 per employee per year.
That's right.
That's what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So what is?
The cost
All right.
per employee per year for 2022, we're estimating $16,311. That's per employee per year. So if the retirees were baked into that, it would be $16,700 because it's an extra $400 per employee per year.
Okay, so if it's an extra that.
I could get you a number where if you said you took out the retirees completely, what would be my net claims cost?
So do we only have 15 or 20 retirees on the plan?
I was going to ask if,
What is the total number of retirees? About 530. 530.
and so, and I'd say, like, does that number continue to grow? I mean.
Yes.
I know it does in some regard. I don't know how many people we necessarily have retire. I mean, we don't have a lot of our 20-year, 25-year employees, but we're getting ready to start hitting that for fire. I know where they're hitting a lot of them are starting to hit their 20-year mark. And so.
The challenge is they're running at 35% hotter than your actives, but they paid the same contribution.
Okay, I guess, so if we have 500 retirees, I mean, but that number is not included in our 1,750
Correct.
employees. So we actually have 2,250 employees on the plan. We have 2,250 lives on the
Yes.
plan. Okay.
Yes.
So that means, so they make up between 20 and 22% of the plan or something like
Yes.
that. So it is a substantial
Yes.
chunk of the plan.
Yes. And they're running 30%.
But they're not. Those aren't lives though. Those are I mean, because how many lives do we have on the policy? Not 2,200, or not 2,000.
I meant groups or.
Yeah.
what-
On the plan, you've got 9,800 that are active and 519 that are retiree that are covered. Covered employees, or covered employee retirees.
But then that would also include their spouses,
Yes.
potentially.
Yeah, and then you've got their spouses covered under them.
So let's, well,
Sorry,
let's
hold
back,
on,
let's,
hold on. Hey, Kev, hold on a
in
second.
this attachment that you guys got previously, there's 86 employees that are retirees. This was a rolling 6-month, 519. There's 86 employees that are retirees that are currently on the plan.
Okay, what's the 500 then?
No, this is a roll, no. Yeah, there's 86 total employees. And I'm sorry, what did you ask me?
I said, well, it was just said 500. So what's the 500?
The 500 was a rolling 6 months. Don't disregard that 519. There's 86 employees on the 86 retirees on the plan.
Okay, so there's only 86 retirees on the plan?
Yes, sir.
And we've got 1,700 active employees on the plan?
Correct.
And the 86 retirees are costing us 30% more, give or take? That's
30% more per employee per year.
Okay, all right. It's not 25% of the overall
Right.
plan, okay.
Right.
All right, I'm sorry. Thank you, Robert.
If I misspoke, you tell
Yeah.
me.
Sorry, so we actually have, we have about 900 retirees, and of those 900, about 550 have medical or dental vision.
Well, what's
So-
86 then? I'm sorry for being so dense. I guess I'm not hearing
No,
correctly or
absolutely.
something.
Yeah, so the 86, that's per month. So 86 employees were retired on the month of January.
Oh, and then it rolled down to 519 total?
Correct.
All right, maybe I don't feel so bad then.
What's that?
Maybe I don't feel so bad then. All right, so there's 500.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Okay.
This report is, okay. So you have 519 total retirees on that plan currently?
Mr. Chairman, would there be a better time to have this conversation where the staff had more time to prepare for it?
No, I think this is fine. I mean,
All right.
the thing is, the meat of this information is important. I don't know if they thought we were going to drill into the number of retirees.
No. And so
But
I thought.
that's a very small part of this overall discussion. I think there's some important decisions that
Well,
need to be made.
But if there's 500 of them if there's 500 of them out of 2,250 participants, they're costing us 30% more. That's a
But,
bigger part of the discussion.
Madam
I think.
Attorney, I mean, based on statute, we don't have a choice. I mean, that's,
But
They can pay more. Well, but they could pay even more.
they're saying, he's not saying they're paying more.
No, they do pay more. I know they pay more because the board's policy is that retirees have to pay 100% of the premium, whereas your active employees do not. The premium amount total has to be the same. You have to offer that to your retirees. It's just that the premium, the total premium has to be offered the same to your retirees, which is what we do. The difference is we don't subsidize any of that premium for the retirees. It's very expensive.
Oh, I know it is.
Very expensive if you're a retiree because you're paying 100% of the premium.
I'm not sure
Your
in the-
active employees are not.
I'm not sure in the market, in the real world, it's that expensive if we have 500 of them on there.
I'm just saying there is a difference in what
yeah,
an out-of-pocket active employee is paying for the same policy that your retiree is
But
paying.
I think that might be more indicative of how generous the policies are for our current employees than it being
Absolutely.
super expensive for retirees. I mean, okay, just, not that it matters, but in my work, over 20 years, there's been a lot of changes. And, people are now people that are trying to retire before age 65 are having to budget $2,000 a month for health insurance. That's what their household is having to budget. I mean, we're to bridge the gap between when they might retire and when they hit 65. And I'm not
It would
saying
be
that.
about $1,600
all
a
right.
month.
So
for me to keep it
let's get to the meat of it. Let's talk about what decisions we made. I mean, I understand the retirements are easy, but that's
Mr. Berry, Commissioner Berry, I want to say, I was told something, I was right, there's only 86 retirees on the plan. There's not 500, someone can. Medical only 86. Medical, dental, and vision costs very minimal, there's 500.
Okay.
On the medical only, 86 employees. That's
So it
it.
is a-
86 retirees.
So it is a small number. And
Yes.
I know previously we've been told that the retiree impact is not the greater portion of the impact because they do pay 100% of their premiums. And if they're 86 of the 1,700, then that's one thing. If they're 500 in addition to 1,700,
That's
it's a different
correct.
thing. Okay.
They're not, but they have the larger claims,
Yeah.
but but their trend is relatively constant with the population. So I'm sorry I got steered into a spot. There's only 86 employees on the medical, 86 retirees on the medical.
Okay, gotcha.
If we go back to this front page, and to your point, Commissioner Bender, if you go back to the front page, I think what we need to do is follow the waterfall down and see the plan design changes, and then focus on this blue bucket, 2020, what's happening in 2021, and then what is the forecast for 2022?
Let me just ask one quick question, Kevin. So of course, we're seeing in this top part here that our actual net cost per employee per year has gone up.
Correct.
Benchmark that for me.
16,000 per employee per year is about 15% higher than the national average.
Okay. But the national average is also seen on nearly, what is that, 45% increase over the last 4 years?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you look at, I represent other municipalities in Pensacola, the city, I also represent some hospitals. Their per employee per year cost is lower than the counties.
How much, do you know about how we can, that 16,000 compares? Are we 10% off or are we 30% off?
Are you talking about from the local or nationally?
Local or state, local or statewide? Yeah.
Statewide, I just said that to Commissioner Bender, you're about 15% hot.
15%. And what about local?
Local, more than that, more than
that?
15%, yeah. The other municipality I represent is a little bit lower, and then the hospitals are lower.
So how are we failing in our administration?
Well, I don't think you're failing, it's just that you have a different risk pool. You have an older population, you have males. 2020, your large claims were horrendous. That I haven't, it was COVID, you had some COVID deaths. This year, you already have a burn that's costing $600,000. So your larger claims have been significantly higher than the benchmark.
But other agencies locally and statewide would have, I presume everybody's been impacted by COVID in the same way. So that would seem to be a uniforming thing.
COVID has impacted everybody, but not, yours was more severe.
Really?
And
Our COVID impact was more severe than other municipalities and other groups?
Yes.
Wow.
If you look at 2020, look at the blue at the bottom. There were 27 large claimants, over 50% of your spec. In the last 10 months of 2020, there were 33 claimants that have accounted for $2.7 million of your claims. So and we were having budget meetings all through 2020. Your team was coming to us and saying, Kevin, what's happening? Our budgets, our claims are shooting up. We'd go dive into our data. Your inpatient claims went up. Your COVID claims went up. There was a number of cancers that happened in the middle of 2020. Your chemotherapy drugs shot through the roof. So that's why when we got our pharmacists involved in 2021, we were able to find an additional $650,000 of rebates because your drugs were escalating significantly in 2020.
Kevin, is there any additional, and Robert and the board, I know we've done this over the last few years, and it's something that I've brought up every time we've talked about this, trying to increase the incentive to get people off of our plan. Are there any, because it appears, again, as not an expert in this by any means, but it appears, what's our incentive to have people off the plan right now? $200 a month?
There's a couple ways that you could do that. You could incentivize them to have their spouses covered elsewhere, or you could incentivize them through compensation to have the employees covered elsewhere.
Crystal, do we pay $200 a month right now for somebody to not be on our insurance? We incentivize them to not be on our plan. What's the number?
Yeah, it's $300 opt-out.
300, is it a month? It's a month, right?
Yes, $300 a month.
Okay. Would we get more participation if we increase that to get people, is there any way for us is there any kind of repository of database of, if we had, say 50 employees that were opting out, receiving this benefit, but we actually have 200 employees that would be in the pool of people that could opt out because of their spousal coverage or their retiree coverage or whatever coverages do we have any right to know what employees could possibly opt out? And
You
if
could
there's,
survey, that's probably the only way, Commissioner Berry. And your plan is a Cadillac plan. You have amazing, $1,000 deductible.
And yet, Mr. Scoggins, we never get credit for that at the bargaining table. We never get credit for that.
Yes, sir.
It's all about the salary. So plan changes might be coming.
Well, that's what
Plan
you have.
changes might be coming. We
Do
don't
other-
get credit
Well,
for it.
that's on here too.
are other people more successful getting people off their plan?
Well, to answer that, I would say no. I mean, a
Not
$300 credit to get off your plan, that's significant.
Is it in the
That's a benchmark.
in
That's a
that in that world?
Yes.
That's a significant
Yes, sir.
incentive to get off.
Yes, sir.
And my guess is you wouldn't get the people off that you need off. I mean, the 33 claimants that accounted for 10% of our spend aren't going anywhere. I mean, I think I heard you said there was a burn that was $600,000. I think I saw that. That was a spouse.
Yes, sir.
A spouse's hand or something.
So,
I mean,
Commissioner.
some of it's just luck. I mean, it's all actuarial, just.
Well, I
Luck.
think if you have an employee with a $1,000 deductible, with the contributions that you pay, they're not going to leave your plan. You guys have but to Senator Burgosh's, Commissioner Burgosh's point.
Like the promotion thing.
You're welcome. Is that you don't get credit for that, and so then you got to weigh out total reward. So do we put it in compensation? Do we put it in benefits? You don't get credit for the benefits. These benefits, the co-pays that you have, the deductibles that you have, the contributions, it's way above benchmark.
You mean way
below
cost to the user?
It's below. It's
Is that-
the cost is below, but the
Local and statewide from your experience?
yes, sir.
Both?
Yes, and the local municipalities here.
Yeah, local and statewide.
Yes, sir.
When you say considerable, I mean, do you mean, are we
I
30%
could
out?
get, it's probably, you got to look at the plan design. The actuarial value of the plan design is probably 20 to 25 points. So most plans do not have a $1,000 deductible. They're up around $2,000, $2,500. And so that impacts the actuarial value. But then you look at the actuarial value of the contributions. And then last year, not to USI's knowing, we increased the HSA contributions. It got done in here and I didn't even know about it.
So, Robert.
So that increases the actuarial value.
So, Robert and the board, I was, trying to do some research, a little while back. Just our peers are often the best place to try to find information, and pulled some counties that were, two or three of the counties above us in population, 2 or 3 below us, just to try to get some feel for what they're having to include in their budget per employee, per year. It's without getting a lot of without reaching out directly to the counties. It's some of them it's hard to find from the budget, but one of the counties that is within a couple of % of our population, they're including a budget expense line item of $7,500 per employee. That's what they have to, and that's their proposed budget. That's what they're including in their current proposed budget for the upcoming year, $7,500 an employee.
$7,800 per employee per year is what they're including in their budget.
Yes.
Yeah, you are.
Now,
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I don't know I didn't look further into it to see who their carrier is. I don't know their plan. I presume it's much, much different than ours. And I'm not saying that that's what we should be, because that's obviously, that's dramatic. But my point is, if there's some things that other counties are doing, we've got to, in my opinion, we've got to at least think about it or talk about it, and Jeff makes a good point, as he mentioned many times, about this plan compared to the school board's plan. I mean, it's considerably different, and we financially we have to look at this. There's no from my point of view, there's no going back. I can't say never. I cannot imagine ever supporting going back to being fully insured. So we are where we are. We just got to figure
And
out
I
how
think
to
they
do it
would
better.
support that. I mean, that with a population our size, you want to be self-funded.
Right.
But there are other things that you can do, and some of the things I think we're going to talk about later are, do we, there was a small increases in co-pays, or not co-pays, but in
Can I just say to Commissioner,
Yeah.
Commissioner Berry, we just got involved with the county's budget about 4 or 5 months ago. The predecessors there never gave us access to the financial people at Escambia County. I created the budget per employee per year based on claims cost. I didn't know that there was a budgeted number. You guys were budgeting 10,800. We just went back and said, you cannot be budgeting that. You need to be budgeting in roughly around 12,500 based on your current claims and your current plan design. The $7,500, if someone is budgeting 75, that's half the benchmark in the country. That plan has to be very draconian. They have to have a high deductible or some sort of HSA plan with very, very, very steep deductibles, very steep coinsurance, very conservative coinsurance. $7,500 per employee per year that's very, very favorable nationally and locally.
But you wouldn't be surprised if we could get down to the point that we were back in the, in the $12,000 range.
No, sir, I have an
12,500.
option for that. Yes, sir.
That's a feasible, no, okay.
Yeah, then you got to back into, if I want to be around 12,000 per employee per year, what kind of plan design do I need to look at? What kind of contributions do I need to look at? How do I structure my HSA plan? How much money do I put into the HSA plan? Drive people to the HSA plan because it trends lower. It creates consumerism. So if you look, did you want me to skip over to what we should do for 2022 or?
Let me,
I'd like.
Commissioner Underhill, do you
Thank
want?
you. I a little bit bristle at the description of that as draconian, because what that would actually create, that 7,500-ish, wouldn't be draconian. It's what the taxpayers in their small businesses and in their employment in the private sector are going through. One of the great travesties that's happening in America is this division between those in government service and those whose jobs and companies pay the taxes that make government service work. Gentlemen, I will tell you, it's too, and I know this is not going to be very popular with the staff members that we rely on every day here, but we didn't take the hits that our tax-paying bosses took.
I agree.
And are continuing to take. This isn't time, I mean, we can sit here and talk about a haircut and we're going to trim this or we're going to do this. This is not a time for small measures. The reality is that we need to set right the overly generous benefits. And as Jeff said, we're not even getting credit for it anyway during the budgeting. But I tell you what, the citizens know that everybody who sits on this dais and everybody who sits out there got their paychecks all year. Mm-hmm. The citizens know that we're cush while they suffer. Mm-hmm. And the citizens know that their tax burden didn't go down. Okay? And as inflation starts to hit and the reality of taxation, and inflation is essentially just a taxation as a result of bad governance.
That's true.
This is the year where we simply must tell staff, these are really good jobs. Even your worst day working for this county is a pretty good job compared to the small businesses where you go to have lunch, who are suffering and making hard decisions about their own family so that they can continue to make payroll and continue to make their accounts payable. So if we're going to sit here and talk about haircuts and trim this and trim that, then we're having the wrong discussion and it's not going to have an impact beyond a good soundbite. It's time for a very significant right sizing. It's not a cut, it's a right sizing of what is a public service or a public employment benefit that has gone completely out of control.
Okay.
I want to weigh in on that too.
Okay.
Commissioner Underhill, the only thing I would say about I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from my peers.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Doug. A couple of things. So, where I work in my day job, we have a Blue Cross plan, and it's incredibly expensive for the few people that have to take it. There's a lot of military retirees, so they and their family are covered under TRICARE. They don't have to take it, but for the few that have families that have to take it, I mean, I'm talking, it's incredibly expensive. It's like $1,300 a month out-of-pocket cost. And these are union jobs. These are good jobs.
Right.
So you contrast that with what similar employees working for Escambia County pay. I want to say they pay like $300 for a similar plan. And oh, by the way, the Blue Cross plan that we have out at NAS in my shop is much less rich. The deductibles are higher, copays are higher, lifetime deductibles are higher. I mean, everything's more expensive. So I say that, and now I want to lean over to our attorney, because I remember on my days at the school board when we had United Healthcare and horrible plans. People would come up, I mean, they're having babies and having to pay for most of it, and, you know, just by using the insurance, their costs were going, but it was ridiculous. It got to a point where they established a precedent. I want to make sure that we're very careful on this, that we had to bargain the plan changes. We had to do separate bargaining for salary and for plan changes for benefits. So, Allison, before we make too much of a draconian cut here, I want to make sure we're not committing a unfair labor practice by doing so, because this should be the subject of bargaining, correct? Or could be.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay, so we have to be very careful, but we can talk about numbers and we can talk about budgets, and we're talking about getting down to 12,000 per employee. All we need from you, Scott, is give us.
My name's Kevin.
I'm sorry. What
That's okay.
Scott, Kevin. All we need from you, Kevin, is just, you know, if we need to get 4 million, what's the quickest way to get there? I understand premium is going to be there. I like what you said about moving people to the HSA. We did that very effectively at the school district. I mean, if you're a young person, it's a great plan.
And it's
the
a
money
no-brainer.
rolls over forever, and we were able to convince a lot of the teachers to do that, especially the young ones. And now they're sitting there 10 years, 12 years later with a lot of money in their account, and they're using consumerism. That's the way it's supposed to work. But this is such a rich plan. There's things we can do that way. We can add premium. Our copays for drugs are ridiculously low.
Yes.
I mean, I love it. It's great. But again, if we're not getting credit for it,
Yes.
you know, it used to be, now people may not want to hear this, but it used to be that, look, you took a pay cut when you went to work for the government, whether it's at a school board, the sheriff's office, a fire department, the county, you name it, the city, the county. You took a pay cut, but you had those great benefits, right? You had the great benefits, you had a job stability, and you had a pension, and you had great health benefits. But you took a pay cut. But now that's kind of bastardized, right? That's not a cuss word, and changed. And now we've got unions in the public sector, and boom, before you know it, everyone wants the best benefits that the public sector can give, as well as private sector pay. And so that's why we find these problems. So look, Doug, you and I may not agree on much, right? We probably do on some. On this, we're probably pretty close.
Yeah,
I
no,
think
you nailed it. I can agree with
Yeah, I mean,
everything you just said.
You know, I'm not going to get beat over the head by people who say, well, you need to pay us more over here, when they're getting the most rich benefits package of anyone in Escambia County. I'm really done with that. So we're going to be hard-nosed at the bargaining table. We're going to be fair. We're going to be hard-nosed.
Yes, sir.
And I've seen it all. Oh, you can take it out of one pocket, put it in another. No, what we're doing is taking out of one pocket and dividing it equitably. Everyone loves the word equity. Let's be equitable. So that's what I'm talking about. But we got to be smart about it, Doug, because everyone's watching and everyone's listening. And if we do this, you know, inartfully, we will get a ULP. So we got to be smart. We got to work with the lawyer and work with our bargaining teams. But we just need the number from Kevin.
Yes,
and the best way to get there, and then we can take it from there at the bargaining table. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I hope we don't break the internet when I say that I agree with everything you just said.
If you listen to me, Doug, you probably agree with me a lot more.
But the key element there is what you've talked about with this trending toward this idea that being in government service is something you should do for a lifetime. Back when you were talking about when you came into this, you had the lower pay, but you had solid benefits and steady a steady job. You also built your understanding of how government worked. You had built your Rolodex, so you built your network, and your network is your net worth, and then moved back into the private sector. What's happening, what's very dangerous in America, is that we are creating a class of government employees that are separate from the people who actually pay for the work we do. That's why, like, our apprenticeship programs are so important, because they give people an opportunity to look, and see how things are actually done as young people. But really, government service is something you're supposed to come to for a period of time and then leave. That's why military retirements are 20 years. Old farts like me in uniform, we're not. That is a very much an anomaly, because war is a young man's game. Government is something people should come into and then step out of periodically throughout their service. That's how it used to be, and it was very effective.
And in most cases, Doug, I agree with you, except when you look at like career type positions, like a teacher, for instance. They're going to stay in government service, for a 30, 35, 40-year career.
Firemen, EMS, police, there really isn't a significant private sector model for those inherently governmental services. Those ones obviously are just like a military. I mean, going to war is an inherently governmental function. Clearly those are anomalies that set aside. But most of our employment base, most of our employees are not in that category. Dan, really good discussion. I mean, that is exactly the discussion I think that we need to be having.
So Kevin, how do we get back down to 12 grand?
Yeah, so
I was shooting for 10.
I was going to let him just get back to the presentation real quick.
Just a couple
and we've gotten everything
clarifications.
out.
That draconian word, I said that because it was at 7,500. That meant that the plan design had to be pretty draconian. I wasn't talking about small business or taxes.
Sure.
I'm a small business guy. I know that that their plans and what they're going through is a lot harder. And I do agree that they look at Escambia County and the employees and see their plan design is incredible. You guys' plan design is incredible. As far as Commissioner Underhill, we need to not Band-Aid it or I forgot the word you said, but not haircuts, but we need to do something more material to the pillars. I think we need to address the deductibles, which we have a Vignette A and Vignette B. We need to address the co-insurance. We need to address the employee contributions, and we need to try to drive people in the HSA. The last thing that I will say is your large claims are killing you because we don't have enough people going to get their physicals. So what we've done now is that if there's a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida is going to come into the county. I think this was already passed to get health risk assessment. Oh, it wasn't passed.
No, and that's what I was going to go with. So I think this right? Was it passed? Did we pass it?
Yes, last week.
I thought, okay. We had pulled something and then it came back on. Okay. So I was thinking this is where a lot of this stemmed from, was that there were some changes we were trying to make. And this is why we need to have this discussion on how we change the plan for this year. So, we've got some savings that USI has done here.
Commissioner Berger, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you look at Plan B, Vignette B, Commissioner Bender, that gets you down to that $12,000 number. You see it's $12,036 per employee per year.
How much of that's in premium increase?
Right here. That depends on what it is. Yeah, 5% to 8%.
See, that's reasonable.
So if I just walk you through the waterfall, that takes the deductible from $1,000 to $1,500 on the high plan, and it increases the low plan from $1,250 to $750. So it's a $500 increase on the deductibles. The increases the out-of-pocket on the high deductible plan from $2,100 to $2,900. And again, just a small. It decreases the co-insurance from $180 to $80.60. So, and if that.
Say that last part.
180 to 80/60. There's not a lot of high deductible health plans out there anymore, again, that are at 100%.
Yeah, we are.
Yes, you are.
And actually, I mean, USI was at some point.
USI, our firm, yes,
Yeah.
7,000, but now we're at 80.
Which is what we usually see for these other plans, right? So is there any changes to those for the co-insurance, or it's just matching those other ones?
Yes.
Okay. Because that was always a benefit of the high deductible plan, was that once you hit your deductible, which was higher, that more of it was paid for.
And Commissioner Burgess, you're right. The high deductible health plan, the HSA plan, it's better than a 401k
Oh,
plan.
it's amazing.
You can put
your whole life, you build it, especially for young, healthy,
Yes.
single people. I wouldn't be in any other plan.
And we did have
if I was.
a high migration to that. We went from
that was a great point.
10 to 11 to 16.5%.
What's that premium? It's like really, really low, isn't it? Low.
It's zero for employees only.
So you could even charge, that's why we said in there, you can put 8% to the high plan, 5% to the low plan. The high deductible plan increase at 5%, so they're going to be paying $5 to $7.
That's great. Yeah, that's amazing.
And then last year you increased the high deductible health contributions from 600 to 1,000. That's what the county puts in. That increased the actuarial value of your plan. That's why it went from 11% to 16. Usually the migration is a couple points. Yours went up 5.
That's really good. Kevin, at this point, though, I have to go back to Allison. So, Allison, these sorts of changes that we're making, how does this impact the bargaining groups that we've already settled with for this year, and how does it impact the ones that are still outstanding, like corrections and fire? Do we have to, how do we proceed here?
Yeah, well, you're not finalizing anything. This is just a workshop, so I think.
understand.
Yeah, so I think we send this information, well, if we get direction from you guys, then we can send it back to the teams and let them deal with that.
I think there has to be, if I remember correctly from a few years ago, there has to be a meeting, workshop it. We're doing this across the board. It's not just to.
Just don't want to get hit over the head with.
No, I know. So.
So Plan B gets us down to 12 grand a person?
Yes, sir, and you're still with an incredible benchmark, right? You're still, it gets you down, you see the bottom in the bold, it says 12,036 per employee per year. That would be your forecast for 2022.
And that would be for next year's?
Yes, sir.
And when would that would kick in, December or January 1st?
January.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And it looks like, but plan changes A would get you to 12.2. So.
That's a good starting point.
So, Commissioner Bender, if you didn't want to take the drastic step of $500 to the deductible, you could just increase it by $250, and you would end up at 12. Now, this is underwriting forecast. This is us taking the plan designs, put them into your data, and looking back 24 months and saying, this is probably what's going to happen with claims in 2022. It's an underwriting forecast. So that includes claims and fixed cost. So if your claims shoot through the roof, then that could go up a little. If your claims go down, which this part of the year, the first part of this year was horrible. In the underwriting model, we tempered it and put in an actuarial decrement when we baked it into 2022. Because right now, your claims are leveling off. And we think they're going to level off for the remainder of the year. And that's how we come up with the forecast for 2022.
I would, not just for employees, but, I mean, we have trouble filling positions now.
Yeah, we do.
And without a pay increase to have them cover some of these things, I think we could see more people leaving.
Well, I mean, we got to look at all issues, though. We can't, again. Robert, I don't disagree with you. I know it's tough. We're talking about the idea of we have a hard time just getting people to roll off the couch and come back to work with all the federal money. I mean, I heard on the radio, a guy was getting $3,600 a month, and he goes, it was more than I was making at my job. Why am I going to go back to work? And a lot of these menial positions where we're having a hard time, and really some of the key positions, not just like janitorial, and they're just not going to roll off the bench and do it. So we add this to the mix, and we're going to increase your insurance premiums. So there's a lot of different ways we could skin the cat. But I agree with you, Robert. It's a tough discussion to have right now when we can't get people to roll off the bench and come to work. But at some point, we do have to have that conversation. I just believe that we do, because I'm not going to get pilloried on salary when they have the richest benefits plan in the state of Florida, right?
I'd say we're doing more than we have in years past. I don't think we've ever had this discussion. I mean, this hasn't come to us before. I know, yeah, but I'm saying it, not like this. I mean, I think it never came to the board before.
No, it didn't.
You know, so.
It was just part of the budget, and it just.
Right.
We
It's part
can
of the budget,
run.
and just, no, we don't, decisions were made before coming to us that said, no, we're not going to make those changes. So I think that's why we're having this today.
Commissioner Bender, we can run whatever options you want. If you said, Kevin, what about if you kept the HSA plan design, the contributions flat, and raise the PPOs a little bit, and that would drive more people into the HSA plan, which would lower your plan, your trend and your consumerism would pick up. Maybe not touch the HSA. These are discussions that I'll have with Crystal, and you guys can guide me on whatever. Do we tweak the plan design, or do we tweak the contributions? Do we beef up the HSA contributions? Whatever you decide or you think's best, you could bounce it off of me, or I can run whatever model you'd like. I think you drive more people into the HSA plan. I think you could keep those contributions relatively light, and maybe the high PPO plan is the one that's really running really hot, and make them pay a little bit more. But
All right, so Kevin, I mean, I know you have a whole dashboard here, so anything else you want to touch on? I know you're looking for some direction from us if we want to go with A or B.
The only thing I would say, Commissioner Bender, is that if you just look at the 2022 considerations, where we went through Plan A and Plan B, I think those have been pretty clear. If you go down into the blue, it just talks about the renewal projection, which is up around 14%, but we talked about how to get it down to around $12,000 per employee per year. The budget was somewhat of a problem that we just got made aware of, where was at $10,008, and I think we got approval for $12,000 per employee per year, which gets us to that $12,036 number. The benchmarking, again, you can see that bullet, that the medical plan and contribution strategy is above benchmark. And when we do the options, we'll make sure that we come back to you and tell you how you stack up benchmark both locally and statewide. I think that's all I have The only other thing I was going to say, which I think there was some noise around, Commissioner Bender, is USI's fee is $125,000. It's never, we initially did 150,000 with Amy Lavoie, and if I didn't achieve the savings, which I had to go find in year one, Melanie, it was,
You had to find 150,000 in fixed cost savings.
I had to find 150,000 in 2019. We actually found significantly more. My fee would have been cut in half. And then since then, my fee has only been $125,000. Because we're a $6 billion USI is a big brokerage firm, there are national overrides that go to New York. But USI Southwest, where I work, our region, the fee's $125, and that's it. That's all we've ever, and so I wanted to make sure that was clear, because we were thinking of getting an extension, but I wanted to make sure I was clear about the fee. Other than that, Commissioner Bennett, I don't have anything else, and I can run whatever options or vignettes or plan design, modeling, whatever we need.
When do you need decisions?
Soon. So obviously, if we do plan design changes, we need to develop all the benefit plans. Obviously, open enrollment's coming up in mid-October. So obviously, September 7th, September 14th.
So that first meeting in September then is really where we need to make a decision on,
Yes, sir.
on what we're doing for next year.
So if you, it's August 12th, if you gave me a target of what day you wanted to have all of the modeling done, I can back into, and if you said if you want my advice on deductibles or co-insurance, or if you just said, Kevin, we're going to go with Vignette B, that's pretty easy. But if you said we'd like to look at different contribution modeling, I don't know how that works within your system. If you wanted to collect options and then come to me and said, Kevin, this was the feedback, collaborative feedback from the commissioners, and this is something we'd like to look at, I can run the different modeling. Or do I just work with Crystal?
I would work with Crystal, especially if we're looking towards that first meeting in September to get this done. But I would say, Board, if you have requests, funnel them through HR, that she can have them and then distribute them as they get fulfilled. Does that seem like the right? Okay. Commissioner Underhill?
Thanks. I don't want to launch into a whole other aspect of this conversation, but I am going to want you to, I'd like to get you on my schedule and my calendar, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about what you said with regard to, that we have, you're seeing a correlation between our large payout cases and those who are failing to do their obligation to do their annual checkup.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Within the constraints, don't need anybody to lecture me about it, and within the constraints of the law, I want to know, how do we make sure that those who choose higher risk behaviors accept the responsibility of those higher risk behaviors? For example, on occasion, I'm going to go smoke a cigarette. Hopefully Wendy's not watching today. Okay. With that decision, I make a choice that I should have to pay more for than somebody who has the discipline to never pick up tobacco. On the other hand, I maintain the Navy's PRT schedule and I work out. As a result of that, I should enjoy the benefit of good decision-making that an obese person does not.
Yes.
Okay. To the extent that it's legal, I want to know where we can incentivize, where it's not really incentivizing a desired behavior. It's making sure that those who choose higher risk behaviors pay the price and the citizens do not pay the price. Those who choose better decisions have the benefit that comes with those better decisions. So I want to, it's a whole other part of this conversation. Obviously, I don't have any time to get into, but please get on my calendar. Let's talk about that and further talk through this. If we can get down to 12,000 per employee, that's great. I think 10,000 is more reasonable in keeping with getting us in line with our private sector businesses that pay our bills. But 12,000 would be a heck of an improvement. Thank you very much.
Just on your point, just getting people to go have a physical, which we have not required before or really even asked them to do. It's free under the plan to go get it. There are other programs that I know we've talked about doing here before that we did not start. So there are things that, for instance, that you have to get so many points, especially as we've somewhat done away with the tobacco thing, and we're looking at giving a discount for those that don't use tobacco, but that's incorporated in that. So whereas you may not get it was like 200 points for tobacco based on your
cholesterol, your, sugars, everything like that, you could work towards 700 points. And if you reach that, then that got you a discount. So, you could get 100 points for a flu shot. You could get 100 points if you, ran a marathon or participated in a running club or something like that, something to show that you were active. But it was a ways of getting on the front end of some of these larger claims, especially with diabetes and things like that. If you can recognize some potentially high claims, the number one benefit is that it's the person. I mean, it's not having them in the hospital for weeks or.
It's how you message it to Commissioner
Right.
Bender, how you message it to your employees, that you're not trying to be a micromanager of their health. You're trying to help them. I mean, we have clients who have 70, 80% participation in physicals once a year, and their trend is down to nothing. They are catching all these large claims, the bullet that's in the gun that hasn't left yet. So I like, Commissioner Underhill, the more people you get to get physicals, your large claims go down, your emergency rooms and your inpatient drops immediately. And a couple other premises is that health risk assessments and biometric data is a good step, but it's all self-reported. So you understand that it doesn't have near the sting as getting people to the physician. Now, we're taking the right steps, but I think at some point it'd be great for Escambia County to have a contribution differential that's significant enough that drives people to get their physicals.
Yeah, and I just want to make clear, hey, if somebody wants to smoke 2 packs a day, they want to drive a motorcycle, they want to drive a car without a seatbelt on, those are absolutely free to do those things. What is not appropriate is for the rest of us to absorb the cost of the additional risk taken. I mean, we race jet skis. I mean, I'm 52 years old and I'm racing jet skis. I mean, that's a pretty high risk thing to do. I'm not very fast, so I'm probably pretty safe. But that cost is borne by me, and it should never be borne by somebody else. And so that's really what I want to make sure that, and the duty and the obligation to get that annual health care. Hey, if they don't want to do that, they don't have to, but they can't be on our health care. If it's possible to get to that point legally, then I think that we should do whatever we can to get there.
Yeah, there's ACA compliance that we would give you the options of. You could go up to 30, 35. I forget the new law now where you can charge 40% more. But we would tell you, we can show you how much you could charge the employees more. You don't want to do that immediately, but you take steps to that. If you think about insurance in general, your workers' comp, property casualty, if you have a house on the beach, you're going to pay a lot more than a house that's in the middle.
A farm up in District 5.
Right, yeah. But if your health insurance is the only insurance where you don't pay more if you're a higher risk. But now that's changed the last 4 or 5 years where they're making people go to the doctor, to the physical, and you can now charge more if they do not get their physicals once a year. So I can explore that.
So, all right, Kevin, anything else? We'll get that information to Crystal and.
Okay. Just one more thing. I know we dived in with the medical, but we do have some other things as far as life insurance, because our life insurance rates have increased significantly. So if we could have conversations and we can schedule time offline, because I know we've already been here quite a few times, to be able to explore that a little bit further. Also with HSA, we are front-loading it and possibly talking about prorating it. So it's another conversation that we'd like to have with you as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Board, anything else? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, last item for the day then is the legislative wish list. I've talked to some delegation members, but also I know in years past we've put together a list, a nice little backup booklet, and just wanted to go ahead and get some input on where we'd like to go with that. I was going to have Chips maybe come up and just mention a few things. Somehow I got caught holding the bag on this one. Other than just making sure that we're prepared because we're going to have a earlier session. I just wanted to make sure, I did want to make sure that we were prepared, ready to go. So, we have gotten some support lately. We had a number of appropriations that passed, but it's not necessarily just appropriations requests. For instance, last year we had the Office of Broadband Services and expansion of the rural broadband access and grants. I know that from what I heard, the infrastructure bill, I think, focuses more on western states, but I still think there might be some money we can go after.
Of course, FDOT's 5-year plan and the Beulah interchange.
DOT, excuse me, I mean, DOT still sees considerable dollars in the bill for Florida transportation. And, I mean, I believe that there is going to be a tremendous push with the state's allocation that the Beulah interchange get moved up and funded as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Yeah, and it would, you know, in the big scheme of things, that's maybe knocking 2 years off of the project, but that's, you know, 2 years is considerable. And that would hopefully be something that would happen or come down the line, you know, prior to the session. But I know, you know, based on some conversations, you know, our district leadership is, I know it's our district leadership's #1 priority. If and when those dollars do come down, I'm promised that. And I know our delegation is tuned in to that as well, so.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah. And I would also tag on, if I might, Mr. Chairman, that, you know, with what's happening in Washington DC and the push and the thrust for an infrastructure bill, obviously we're gonna have money for that in the state of Florida too. So I would say not just the Beulah interchange, but other long-standing issues in each of our districts. And one of the ones that I'll talk about is Pine Forest Road between 9 Mile Road and the interstate. I mean, that's been a long simmering thing. $10 million. If we can get that, I mean, that'd be an easy low-hanging fruit that we could take care of, but there's a lot of them. And I think, Robert, I mean, the thing that I think we could concentrate on is just critical infrastructure stuff that we don't have the funding for with all this money printing in Washington DC. Even though we don't agree with it, I know I don't. If we're going to get the money, let's put it into infrastructure. And I think we should, while we're having this conversation, we should engage our engineering department to identify a critical list of infrastructure, traffic, and drainage projects for which there's not an identified funding source and for which there's matching money available. And whatever, as we get these big swaths of money, these tranches of money, and let's just start knocking them off the list. And it'd be great if this board could agree with the list. I mean, I love the fact that I have support for the Beulah interchange. It is an important regional project, but I want to support projects in every one of our districts, critical infrastructure projects, especially now that money's being printed. And if we have a list of 10 that we all agree on, let's just knock them out one by one.
And there's you know, some news that happened last session, you know, about the rural broadband stuff. The legislature actually put the structure or the bones in place for a grant program. The state already received a couple $100 million for expansion of rural broadband, I think maybe $250 million, something like that. But and Chips, you may correct me if this is incorrect. I think it's correct. They put the structure in place for the grant program, saying that they will have one. They didn't define what the match would be. You know, for local government, it would be a 20% match, a 40% match, whatever. They didn't define what the local match would be. They didn't put in place any of the bones of an application to access those funds. And although that's what the program is titled, the expansion of rural broadband access, and the funds are sitting in Tallahassee that are earmarked specifically for rural broadband expansion. They didn't actually allocate how much of that 200-something million or whatever the number was, how much of that total allocation would go towards this grant program versus going towards just allocations so. I would hope that one of the issues we would take up is just ask our delegation to try to firm up as much of those dollars that came that are already there in hand towards the grant program, and then certainly this session, let's get the program funded, whatever level that they'll fund, and put the parameters in for the applications, for the grant, for the match, for the things, so that we could potentially start accessing some of those funds, after session, or at least when the budget's done next summer.
Well, I know there's a Resilient Florida dollars. The deadline is approaching, and I've tried to get us to get some of those in process. The deadline's September 1st. I mean, that's it's.
On which program, Robert? I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
It's the Resilient Florida. It's the DEP program.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't see Tim Day here. I mean, there's Tim. And I just haven't talked to Chips about it personally, but I did talk to Tim Day a couple weeks ago about, trying to, I've got one project, some Chandler Street drainage that Tim's pretty familiar with, that I was asking him to, try to get jump-started in there, and there may be others, but I'm not sure if that's something he's talked to you about or not, Chips, but, yeah, Robert, I knew the deadline was coming up, and hopefully we can get something in. I don't know, I want to say that Tim said the grant application for that was very, very short and not tremendously specific, that we could get our application in on time and then firm up the details of the project and some of the other things afterwards, if it was deemed favorable. So, Mr. Chairman, I was hoping that we would, and I just haven't talked to Tim this week, I was hoping we were going to have one or two of these on the agenda next week.
Yeah, and I don't know if maybe we should look into a grant writer position with all of these different programs that are coming.
We've talked about it a bunch.
I know we've talked, yeah.
I don't know that I know Jack, Jack searched over, well, Allison, you would remember this, as well as anybody. I know he searched over a relatively long period of time and never found somebody that was a good fit, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to search again. It's obviously a hugely beneficial position, and there are tons, the availability of funds now is exponentially more than it was just 3 or 4 years ago when Jack was here. Things have changed, obviously, a lot.
Right.
So, maybe we could get somebody now. I've never understood why we haven't had somebody to hold it for 20 or 30 years, but maybe they're hard to find. I know I've worked with some organizations that have applied for impact grants over the years. We've had to contract for grant writers, pay them a couple $100 an hour to work on it. I guess they're in demand.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why we haven't been able to get somebody.
So, Commissioner Underhill?
Yeah, a good grant writer's he's billing $300 an hour. For the truly competent ones, the ones who have winning records. It is also getting a grant writer at salaries that we pay as full-time. I'm not necessarily certain that you would get, if you did hire somebody, probably wouldn't be the caliber that we'd be looking for. But I will say, along the lines of what Commissioner Berry just said with regard to the broadband, the legislature's done a good job in the last 2 years putting the mechanisms in place for money for stormwater as well, and septic to sewer. So, my office is working on two requests to capture the money from last year. These are stormwater projects in Warrington. They've been languishing on the stormwater plan since the 2014 SWAT devised that plan. So it's not new stuff. It's things that we've already known that we needed. We're just going to go ahead and put some money behind it. You should see those coming before the next board meeting for local option sales tax discretionary for District 2, funding our part of that, but getting the rest of it done through that state money. So I think that our legislative asks and focus should really be on making sure that we're capturing those resources that are already out there. I want to take the opportunity to reiterate, although I've said it a bazillion times ever since it came up, the Beulah Interchange is the single most important infrastructure project that Escambia County has on the plate. This board took a very aggressive action of turning over almost 7 miles of Perdido Key Drive, taking responsibility for that, and only turning over to the state a couple miles, right? That was a huge move on the part of this board, a 5-0 vote that said, this is what's important to us. And as we discuss the Beulah Interchange, we should always remember that we've already put our money where our mouth is in the form of that act. And to the best of my knowledge, there's never been anything other than a 5-0 vote on that issue. Which included, quite frankly, some things that weren't necessarily politically popular, but it was the right thing to do. It remains the right thing to do. So whatever we can do to energize and move that forward is critical. Also, keep in mind that when Blue Angel Parkway was created, it was designed to be a 4-lane road all the way to the interstate.
And now's the time. Doug, that's a great point.
We promised the citizens that was going to be your hurricane evacuation route. You'll remember during the Perdido Key Drive discussion, so well, what about, it's got to be 4-lane for hurricane evacuation. There's nobody on the island 2 days before the hurricane. The evacuation has more than taken place. The bottleneck in Escambia County takes place at Blue Angel and Pine Forest and points north from there. It actually probably starts a little bit before there now, actually, like around the Muldoon is really where Blue Angel really starts to jack up. Now, this board, again, through 5-0 votes, has gotten us to the point where the 4-laning of Blue Angel as far as 98 is fully funded and moving forward. We're in right-of-way acquisition phase right now. We should, sometimes, you get a little win and you take a victory lap. As you just said, now is better. There's never going to be a better time because this money it's printed crap money, but it's coming out. So we may as well spend it on the things that we've known we've needed for a long time. It's not a time for new good idea fairy stuff. It's funding the stuff that we've already promised the citizens decades ago that we were going to do. So
Doug, you're 100% right on that, man. And so Robert.
We just broke the internet now.
Yeah, man.
That's twice in one meeting.
No, especially Blue Angel.
Reciprocal too. I mean, you like him, he likes you. Wow.
Well, the thing is though, so how do we put this discussion into action, Mr. Chairman? Do you want, should we give some direction to staff to bring us, what we're talking about here, the Blue Angels, the interchange, all these critical projects that are, we're going to have opportunity for one-time money, and then put those out there? I mean, how do you want to take this and
No, I want everybody to start thinking about it. We got to bring a list up.
I want to, if you don't mind, I've still got the floor on this. The TPO priorities list is the number one place to make sure that we're aligning that properly. So we have to be in sync with that TPO priority list. And what we can do is accelerate the things that are on the list and perhaps even, make some change and have to take a hit and say, hey, this thing needs to move back so that this can move forward. But then, ultimately it is going to come down to making sure that we're putting our, that very small local lift that comes with those things. But I mean, certainly right now, articulating that there are core infrastructure road issues that are must-dos, and make sure that list remains small and remains focused on things that benefit the county as a whole. Not look at it in terms of, well, I got to have one of these in my district and one in my district. It's not, I mean, none of the rest of Blue Angel is in my district physically, but man, it sure affects my citizens, right? In a time of evacuation. So, if we do move forward with a small group of those that, these are our burning, critical road projects, and go ahead and put that into it, and especially if we can get a 5-0 vote out of it, to say this is where we stand, and then we send our delegation to Tallahassee with that, and not just our delegation to Tallahassee, but make sure that when we bring on the new lobbyist, that lobbyist, I don't want that lobbyist going to dinner with Alex Andrade. Okay, Alex can go to dinner with us. That lobbyist needs to be going to dinner with the staff members and making and really working the halls, not of the elected officials, but of the staff.
Yeah.
The ones that can actually, they may not be able to get it done, but they sure do create the off ramps to know.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear that my request was not just necessarily for road projects, and I think you're right. The governor has gone and looked at his staff. Goes and looks and see where it is on the TPO and wants to make sure that our requests are in line with those. So I think our funding of the 5-year FDOT's plan has been the right direction for us the last 2 years. We still have opposition to unfunded mandates on local governments, which I think is certain. We've also been successful in getting some Perdido Bay Estuary Program dollars the last 2 years. We have that award meeting coming up. So Chips, do you have a couple others? And again, I've got 2 projects that we're working hard on right now in the Ferry Pass area where consultants have said, if you do this project, you will eliminate the flooding or greatly reduce the flooding. And honestly, for me, I would rather do that project than purchase the property, never be on the tax roll again, break up neighborhoods, on a project that someone said that this is a fix that we can make and not have it flood anymore. So we've been working on those projects, and I think there's probably some resiliency dollars out there, grants, things like that.
Thank you, Commissioners, and good morning. One of the projects that we discussed in our Natural Resources Department that has come out of the Restore dollars and the Pot 1 funds that y'all have allocated, one of those projects was universal access. which provides ADA compliance for Perdido Key and Pensacola Beach. That study has been completed. It has identified projects that need to be done to reach that ADA compliance, and we have an estimate of about $1.2 million to implement that study. So that might be a good ask of the legislature to try to get us some funding for ADA compliance there on the beaches. Also, talking to Captain Turpin, we're trying to expedite and speed up the derelict vessel removal program. And one way that we've thought to do that is to work on language in Florida Statute 823. Currently, that language only allows Fish and Wildlife Conservation officers, the Marine Patrol, and also sheriff's law enforcement deputies to implement that process of derelict vessel removal. It occurred to us that our code enforcement officers do something very, very similar when they actually look at properties and they document the condition of the piece of property and post it and notify the owner. It's the same process with the derelict vessel. So our thought is to work with our legislative delegation and try to get code enforcement officers included in that list of people that could be authorized to do this derelict vessel removal process.
I think you'd get FAC on board with that because this is affecting lots of other counties.
I think it is, and I think it would be something statewide that there would be support for.
Well, let's go ahead and add that. Let's go ahead and submit that to FAC for a policy. And that deadline's coming up.
Okay.
20th, maybe?
Yeah.
And then, of course,
so let's go ahead and put something together and send it to FAC.
We've got it ready to go. And then, of course, there are other Pot 1 funded projects, restore projects that we've done the design on, we've done the permitting on, and now we're looking for funding to actually construct the projects. And there are things like the 11 Mile Creek flood mitigation project and the stormwater ponds in 11 Mile Creek that I know Commissioner Berry is very concerned about. There's the Hollis T. Williams Stormwater Park, which could be a joint ask with the city and the county. Carpenter Creek projects that are being identified to do. And then, as Commissioner Bender mentioned, the estuary program, that $250,000 allocation that we've been getting for the mini grant programs, that funding has gone toward community groups and homeowners associations and universities and high schools to implement water quality improvement projects, environmental restoration projects. So we'd like to have that request again to continue that mini grant program for the estuary program.
Perfect. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Bender, the estuary program, obviously continuing to drive that forward. I think our cash burn rate still remains a little slow, but we should keep that in the forefront of the mindset over in Tallahassee. And certainly keeping it on the getting even small funding each year is key to staying in the game there. But along those same lines, one of the things this board has always been very actually another thing that we actually get really good 5-0 votes on is anything that involves water access to all citizens. We have a massive boat dock project coming up in District 1. That is actually very important for my district as well, because the burden of boat launches and recoveries that it'll be relieving are the 2 boat ramps, at the state park and also at Galvez. So that's one of those things, not in my district, but it certainly affects my people, right? The other one that I think that we should probably look at and find out if there's, I'm not necessarily saying add it as a specific financial ask, but to make sure that we're taking advantage of the resources over there. Isn't the fishing pier in your district somewhat damaged or in need of assistance?
Yeah, we're hoping to go through FEMA and insurance for that.
but yeah.
Right, so I don't, and again, I'm not trying to get into y'all's areas, I just, keeping it, people, every citizen in Escambia County should have access to the water, whether they live on the water as I do, or whether they live in the middle of the county. So, that's something that, like I say, we've always been able to agree on, and if there are things along those lines, and when Chip's brought up universal access, it reminded me that that's something that
Well,
we.
the bigger thing we're doing, I appreciate that, Commissioner, is, but on the other hand, we're also looking at what we can do with the Bob Sykes Fishing Pier, which doesn't have insurance or FEMA money tied to it. We have a little NERDA going on with it. And how we had a project going, but with the possibility of a new bridge in, 15, 20 years, they're like, hey, we don't want to put a lot of money towards that. So we're looking at just moving it a couple hundred feet to the east. But at the same time, the bridge itself is in need of repairs, and I mean, you don't drive a boat under it. It's you see concrete pieces hanging off, and so
Yeah, once you see the rebar, when you can see the rebar, so can saltwater.
Yeah.
You got problems beyond problems. So. But yeah, so I mean, I bring it up as whatever those are. While those projects may reside in individual districts, they really affect the quality of life. I mean, if you don't have access to the water, if you don't have access to the lifestyle that is Escambia County, then, I mean, heck, you may as well be in Kansas.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually working on the boat ramp at right next to Morgan Park on the beach. It doesn't help if you have access if you get stuck.
Fair enough. Yeah. So again, I'm not trying to get into your sauce, but I just thought
Nope, I appreciate it.
it would be worth addressing, if there is or just making sure that we don't miss an opportunity for lack of addressing it.
Yep.
So you good on that?
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I would, one more project, the Quintet Road Bridge.
Yes, sir.
Santa Rosa to Escambia.
Yeah, and that's going to be a heavy lift, and that's also going to include FDOT, and I know they're going to hopefully help us with some of their off-grid dollars. Madam Attorney, did you have?
This is just before you adjourn?
Yes,
Are
ma'am.
you at the end?
I think we're there.
Okay. This is just to make sure the board is made aware. At your last board meeting, you asked that I release the second of the 2 memos related to the retirement issue, which that was done immediately on Friday morning. The first of 2, we were holding back, but upon review of that document, it discusses in part the retroactive settlement issue, which came up early in this conversation. It has become crystal clear to me on individual conversations as well as public conversations as well as comments to the media that not one commissioner considers that to still be an active issue. Not one commissioner that I am aware of considers that to be anything that they are pursuing. So I consider that a dead issue, and I'm going to have to release that first memo. So
When are you going to do that, Allison?
today.
All right.
So just letting you know.
Thank you for the
Noted.
discussion on the progress.
Okay. All right. Anything for the good of the whole? We're adjourned. Thank you.